Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching second and final part of What If Naruto Found a Sword of the Forgotten Past. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
The five were returning to Konoha the next day. The young couple resumed their jutsu practice. Oddly enough, despite his performance last night, Naruto was unable to produce a finished Rasengan on call and had to continue his training. Though slowly, Hinata's was still making headway. At the very least, she was eliminating shapes that her chakra wouldn't accept when she attempted to get it to take on a random form. All of this took time, and based on the sun's position in the sky, it was approximately noon when they looked up. Everyone's attention was drawn to Naruto's sudden stop. Whispering, "I hear something," he hadn't yet mastered his enhanced senses, but they would come to him instantly when danger was present, as if they were an innate awareness. When a small white rabbit jumped out of the bushes, the two Sannin began to laugh, but it spit up blood and fell in their path. "Not bad," a man's voice called out. They noticed a man with silver hair wearing a Konoha Hite.8 when they looked up. "My name is Kabuto and I'm here to get revenge for the death of my master, Orochimaru." Jiraiya waved the man away as if he were a bother, saying, "Yeah, I heard he was brutally killed, but you've got the wrong guys." He looked straight at Naruto and said, "No, I'm sure I have the right one." "Are you kidding?" Let out Tsunade. She felt that even if Orochimaru hadn't gotten any stronger, he couldn't have defeated him because she knew exactly how strong he was before he left the village. The young orange-clad ninja was nervously scratching his head when she turned to face him. "Oh, you're pissed about that? Well, let's say I wasn't thinking correctly. Sorry?" In an attempt to validate his theory, Kabuto said, "Just as I suspected, it was you Naruto-kun. I take it you let the Kyuubi come out to play." "Nah, it was something different. Anyways, since I apologized, let's just head back to Konoha. No hard feelings, right?" Kabuto pulled out a vial, smeared a red liquid on his hand, and then went through a series of hand seals. "Yeah, sure, that sounds good. You're all forgiven," as if, he said. He then applied chakra to the technique by thrusting his hands to the ground. Kuchios no Jutsu. A big purple snake licked at the air after emerging in a puff of smoke. He looked at Kabuto and demanded, "Where's Orochimaru?" The big snake thought about it for a minute before saying, "He has been killed. After you exact revenge on the one in orange, I shall give you 100 sacrifices as well as myself for compensation." Before long, his scaly skin appeared to be grinning. Agreed. Given that the snake was listening to someone without a contract, Jiraiya swore, "Oh crap." He was about to perform his own summoning when he noticed that they had diverted their focus from Kabuto to the summons, and the man had succeeded in ambushing Hinata, the one person he had no fear of. Placing one arm beneath her elbow, he used his hand on the back of her neck to push her arm into the air. With his other free hand, he firmly grasped a kunai at her throat. "Looks to me like you have two choices. Fight and let this girl die, or give up and you all die. It isn't all that difficult. No matter which way it goes, she dies." Jiraiya swore, "Fuck." It was just his luck that the man had to pursue her. He covered his eyes with his hands and cowered, face down on the ground. Tsunade was about to kick the man for his cowardice when they all felt a sudden shockwave of chakra descend upon them, and Kabuto grinned at his willing defeat. "There are 3 things you should know before you die," the typically cheerful blonde growled in a low voice. There was nothing but blood red in his eyes. With a single glance, the dark slit in his eyes seemed capable of drawing you down to the flaming depths of hell. His prominent whisker lines revealed a great deal about the untamed aggression that was emerging. His powerful step caused the ground to crack as he took one step in Kabuto's direction. 1. "Never threaten my friends," he continued, giving Kabuto a start and causing his hold on Hinata to loosen a bit. 2. "Never threaten my village." Naruto reached to his side and firmly grasped the Kitsune sword. A big, blood-red blade was effortlessly taken out of the scabbard. It was roughly 5 inches wide at its widest point and had a sweeping curve to the blade. Its dull red blade almost appeared to absorb light itself, as if it didn't even give off the slight sheen. 3. "Never touch my Hinata." The blade's abrupt slash caused 9 chakra tails to shoot out from his butt. Even Tsunade felt weak in the knees from the intensity and pressure of the chakra being released. Breathing heavily and struggling to breathe in the heavy air, she collapsed to one knee. She turned to see Shizune and Tondan unconscious on the ground. Despite the weight, she struggled to turn her head back to Kabuto, where she saw Hinata's fists spill over, a great deal of chakra forming around her hands in the most memorable face she had ever seen, the Kyuubi. A sharp, thin shockwave blasted outward from the girl as she spun away from his relaxed hold and angled a punch at Kabuto's midsection. This sent the man flailing backwards, crashing through some trees, and sliding to the ground in a manner that made it clear that his back was broken in multiple places. Tsunade looked in the direction of the nine-tailed Hanyu, observing his sharpened claws, chakra ears, and tail in all their unbridled splendor. The snake's tail was easily cut by the dark red sword, which then sank its blade into the ground and tore up the ground 100 feet away. Raising both of his hands, Naruto gestured at the snake that was attacking. A ball of the darkest, deepest chakra formed in front of his hands, intensifying and condensing until it began to bend light itself, just as the reptile was about to swallow him whole after the sword missed its target. The ball exploded outward, destroying the attacking snake in an instant by directing the dark chakra right through it. Tsunade fell to her hands and knees as she felt her other leg give way. She witnessed Hinata approaching the terrifying demon with no effort at all in the thick air. She wanted to yell for her to avoid it, but she was unable to find the right words. She flinched for Hinata when she was seen and thought she would see the worst, but what surprised her more was when they kissed and hugged. She fell forward, gasping for air as the atmosphere returned to normal, and a sudden breeze swept across her brow, which was adorned with the emerald diamond. She was unsure of how to react to what she saw there. The Kyuubi was so powerful that even the Sannin, who had previously resisted its attacks, was unable to withstand its influence. As amazing as that chakra was, she was even more fascinated by the fact that the small Hyuga woman could move freely and worry-free in it. Tsunade inhaled deeply before turning to face the pale-eyed woman in front of her, Hokage-sama. The curvaceous blonde staggered to her feet and approached the young man slowly, saying, "Naruto-kun broke his arm with that last attack, could you help him?" The blood on his arm didn't even make her cringe. Her greatest fear could not have been something as trivial as blood after that terrifying performance. "Is he?" Tsunade inquired, uncertain of Naruto's mental condition. Tsunade sighed and began her medical jutsu, saying, "He's fine. He just gets enraged when his bond with me is threatened." "What's your bond?" she asked as she continued to recover. Happily, she said, "Hanyu have no stronger bond than that of their mate." "Hanyu? You mean he combined with the Kyuubi? It was something artificially done to him and moments after it happened, he chose me as his mate." "Interesting. But wouldn't a demonic bond require a part of you having demon blood?" "True, the Byakugan is a manifestation from demon blood mixing with the ancestor we share with the Uchiha." Unsure of how to react to the sudden barrage of information, the medic questioned, "Wait, so the Hyuga are technically Hanyu? More human than demon, but yeah, we are still, well, half-breeds or mutts, from a classical view." Tsunade finished her jutsu and couldn't help but admire the blonde. "Weird, the things even the Sannin are unaware of," she said. When she heard a loud slap, she got up and went back to wake Shizune. It appeared that Jiraiya had already woken her up, but in a more twisted way. Hinata yelled, "One more thing," and the medic turned to face her. The girl's cheeks were a deep red, and she was now tinkering with her fingers. "Yes? Could you, I want to," she said, blushing more as she turned to face her partner on the floor. "You want that? How old are you?" I'm 12, but the active Hanyu blood in both of us accelerated out maturing process and well. You get urges. More than that, go into heat and can't control the desire. We've already, fine. No need to embarrass yourself any further. I really don't understand this Hanyu business, though." She took a small card out of her pocket and gave it to the new Hokage, saying, "This is the best way I could put it." She glanced at the photograph before turning back to face the woman. Tsunade's eyes widened in shock as she said, "That is my academy ID. That was what I looked like just a little over about a month ago. When we get back, I want to do a full exam on you to be sure this change left you healthy. This is the most intriguing thing I've come across in years." "Sure, that's fine." At this point, they heard clothes rustling, which alerted them to the Hanyu's gradual standing up. Unable to identify the thing that almost destroyed his body, he remarked, "Wow, what was that thing I launched? That was killer on my body. I would have hated to be on the receiving end of that." That was the Biju Dama, the most powerful attack in the arsenal of the tailed beasts. This attack even exceeds the power of a high-level demon. "Ah, so that's what it was." Tsunade gave him a peculiar look. She said, "Who are you talking to?" He held up the sword, which now resembled an old rusty blade rather than the big red one, and said, "Who? Oh, Kurama." "Kurama? The sword. Wait, that's one of the lost treasures?" Tsunade concentrated on the sword's hilt and the blasted nightmarish fox head that was perched atop the pommel, still haunting her memories of Hinata's attack. Yeah, but the old guy, Muramasa or Shapeshifter, as he called himself, was caged up by Kurama so he could inhabit the sword. Wait, the Kyuubi is now in the sword? Naruto laughed at the fox's response, catching the Hokage's piercing gaze. This broad catches on quickly. I believe she might make a respectable Hokage. Oh, sorry, he says you might make a good Hokage. Oh great, a recommendation from a being who tried to wipe the village off the face of the earth. Well, he was actually under someone else's control, but basically yes. Tsunade sighed, reconsidering her choice to become Hokage. It might be simply too much work. Damn, I'm going to have a lot to read up on when I return, I thought. Tsunade slapped him in the back of the head and yelled, Jiraiya. A little warning next time, that chakra was too intense. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's okay. Every man for himself. He grabbed one of her enormous breasts and quickly left. Jiraiya. She tripped the elderly man by slamming her fist into the ground and tearing up the ground within 50 feet. Jiraiya's best toad friend appeared and threw the Sannin on his back, saying, Shit, Kachiyose no Jutsu, it's Tsunade again. Gamma, let's go. The two made a huge leap and vanished into the forest at a remarkable pace. Gosh darn that old jerk. You better not end up like him, Naruto, she yelled, furious at his pass at her, frowning at the lone male remaining. Don't worry, I won't, he grinned and seized Hinata's chest, causing her to blush and squeak loudly, but she didn't respond. See, big difference, I have permission. Naruto.kun. Not in front of other people, it's embarrassing, she murmured. He stomped off in a blatantly fake pout to begin cleaning up the mess they had created, saying, Fine, be that way. I guess I'll go take care of the dead guy. Since Jiraiya had flown the coup, it was up to them to set the pace for their return to Konoha, which could very well be a much quicker journey back without the mandatory research stops. Naruto was now heading back down the road with 3 women and a pig, who was also female, making him a horribly outnumbered being. As with all of their journeys, the couple was still taking their time walking while honing their techniques to bring them to a higher level of polish. Following the display with Kabuto, Hinata was thrilled to be able to use her new jutsu on command. Yuho Esokitsunkan, as she called it. Gentle Step. Twin Fox Fists. It was a logical progression of the Gentle Fist, which dealt out a great deal of physical damage and extensive damage to the chakra system. This technique was a verifiable one-hit kill technique, and after witnessing the damage done to his body, she vowed never to use it on anyone other than someone she was willing to kill. She was pleased with her development, but she was a little concerned about Naruto, who was still having some issues with the Rasengan. It wouldn't stay stable, but he could perform something even more challenging, like the Biju Dama, in the heat of furious combat. She reasoned that there must be something else he was missing or failing to notice that could only be discovered when she was in danger, but he managed to make the jutsu work in front of Tsunade when she wasn't in danger, shortly after he had made a commitment. Hi, Kurama-san. Interrupting Naruto's current Rasengan attempt, Hinata remarked, You mentioned that your promising curse sharpens his focus. Is that why he was able to execute those jutsu in the past but not now? Yes. You're right, it also increases your comprehension of chakras. It did seem strange that Naruto.kun, who had previously made it appear simple, was now having trouble creating a Rasengan. The issue would be explained if it enhanced his focus beyond what he could currently handle. How, really, Hinata? Naruto inquired, his curiosity piqued by the subject. For the sake of explanation, let's say that your maximum level of concentration is 100. We'll refer to these as concentration points. You simply lack the concentration to pull it off if the Rasengan requires 125 concentration points. An ability taking 125 will be relatively easy because you will have 200 concentration points to spend if your concentration doubles when a promise is threatened. Wow, that kind of is an easy way to think about it. It's like one of those games we'd play in Academy where you'd have magic points to spend on spells. Exactly, that's why I chose this way. Alright, so how would I sharpen my focus to use it normally? I don't know, it seems using the demonic chakra has a similar effect, but you won't want to use that without scaring people, so unless you suddenly have 2 of yourself, I don't see a way to do it. 2. At the inspiration moment, Naruto smiled. He had nearly forgotten about that ability. A clone then materialized beside him, grinning as crazily as he did. Shadow clones, that's correct. Hinata grinned broadly. She, too, had nearly forgotten the advantages of having clones. Now he could leave one task to each of his clones, instead of splitting his attention between controlling the chakra power and spin. Naruto extended his hand, concentrating on spinning the chakra while the clone poured the required amount of energy into the jutsu. Once the desired level was reached, he could easily keep it spiraling on his own. All right. I understand, happy to have discovered a way to use his most potent technique, Naruto yelled. The new Hokage was so absorbed in her thoughts that she failed to notice that the couple was now staring at her as if they were waiting for an answer, and Tsunade, who had been watching them the entire time, had to admit that the two were good together. Hinata could explain things so he could understand the concept, and he had the imagination to think of new ways to overcome his shortcomings. She now believed, more than ever, that those two would advance at a rate almost as drastic as their body transformations. What? Tsunade inquired, observing her inattention. We wanted to learn how to summon, so we asked you to teach us. I take it you can summon? Hinata inquired. The Hokage shot back, well yeah I can summon, like a Sannin couldn't summon. Do they have the strength of a large lion or something? Naruto pondered, his thoughts whirling with potential answers. She can be strong depending on the circumstance, but my summons aren't an attack type. In any case, I firmly believe that you ought to discuss summoning with that pervert. I have no doubt that he would allow you to sign the Toad summoning contract. The blonde Hanyu smiled and said, that might be cool and all, but we really just need the signs. Kurama is going to teach us how to summon the foxes. Really, I didn't know there was a fox summoning contract. According to him, there isn't, since they are a really high-level demon clan. For us it will be more like requesting help and they will arrive using their own power. Okay, but just be careful, and I probably wouldn't practice within Konoha. It would scare the villagers to see a demon fox anytime soon. Yeah, I know Ba-chan. Those guys are paranoid. Tsunade demonstrated the summoning jutsu technique to both of them before observing the outcomes. Kumarama, how much chakra should I use? In an attempt to determine how much was required to call forth the desired fox, Naruto pondered. You'll want to use a lot, but not so much as to summon the interim leader. That would cause too much friction in their ranks. I think we should try to summon the Myobu, the seven-tailed fox whose predecessor was the progenitor of the Hyuga. There will be some understanding of who you two are with her. How much chakra would that require, then? Naruto inquired, stating that it was a lot but not knowing the precise amount. I would go for pushing out the power of that new jutsu from both hands and hope for the best. He made the proper hand gestures and pushed his hands to the ground, saying, leaving it up to luck. Now that's something I can relate to. He felt the chakra leave his body, but when he looked up, he saw that nothing had changed, not even a puff of smoke like when Manda was called forth. As everyone was beginning to declare it a failure, a distortion appeared in the air before him. A form that resembled a glass figure appeared before the shine faded, revealing a bright white fox with its head at eye level, staring at Naruto with a determined and firm gaze, its 7 bushy white tails swaying in the air to advertise its demonic status. Who calls forth the Myobu? It demanded in a voice that sounded more like a growl than a voice. In fact, aside from Naruto and Hinata, it was a growl. She cautiously scanned each ninja, pausing when she saw the Hyuga's distinctive eyes and realized right away that they were descended from them. Did you, girl? She insisted as she moved closer and sniffed the air around her. Naruto became nervous at the sight of the big beast so close to his mate and started to move in their direction when the fox snarled at him and bared her teeth fiercely. The next breath will be his last, so tell that one to stay back. The Hyuga looked at her mate with a look of fear in her eyes and asked him in silence what to do. Now tell me how you activated your Hanyu blood and summoned me, the Myobu demanded of Hinata. Seeing the fox's teeth approach the girl, Naruto yelled, step back from Hinata. The fox gave him a crazy look as he gave him the order. You must speak to the kitsune in terms that they can relate to, such as power and instincts, because they are not human and do not comprehend human ways. They are unfamiliar with their usage because they lack names. How dare you speak so impudently to a greater demon? Naruto was infuriated by the threat that was assured in her demonic eyes, which pointed at the Hyuga, and she snarled again for emphasis before turning back to Hinata. You should back off, I told you, I'll tear those tails off your body if you ignore me once more. The blonde swiftly moved between them and looked the fox in the eyes, turning his eyes red and growling at the fox as Naruto yelled, hoping that Kurama's advice to show force would help him communicate with the demon. The white kitsune didn't even acknowledge the conversation and wasn't backing down. Remove yourself from my partner, I said. The large fox backed up nervously, creating space between them and standing down as it shuddered at the pulse of intensely concentrated chakra. It knew of no other being that could instill such a level of fear in a demon of its ability. I apologize. I assumed she was the one who called me because I could smell you all over her. Who will you be called? Naruto, I guess. The fox gave him another look as if he were speaking a foreign tongue. You fool. Kitsune only have titles. They have no names. Use the title that the Hyuga leader gave you. I apologize. I suppose I'm referred to as the Lord of Foxes. After hearing those words, the fox's expression changed to one of odd kindness, as if there had been a conceptual breakthrough. Oh, I see. How is Kurama? Chan? It questioned in a gentle, almost maternal voice. Kurama. Chan? Naruto lightened the mood by laughing. Now that's a good one. Silence. The young man's laughter drowned out the Kyuubi's words, so they were ignored. So, how are you acquainted with Kurama? Chan? Naruto inquired, chuckling once more at the final line. He was my kit. What? Oh. At this point, Naruto felt guilty for his jests, and his feelings worsened when he realized his current location. With the exception of her bright white hair, ears, and tails behind her, the white fox, wearing a ghostly white kimono and with a pale complexion that nearly made her look white, stepped forward and shed her fur and fox features, saying, "He's kind of in my sword now." Yes, I apologize for confusing him with this. For no apparent reason, Naruto apologized. No, we never imagined that he would have contributed to the development of the most potent Kitsune Hanyu, even though we knew that humans would eventually take his life. I think your generosity in demonstrating to him the value of coexisting with people is what allowed him to be transferred to the sword. So why is Hinata the target of such animosity? Now that everything had subsided, he pondered. I discovered one of those mixed breeds after sensing the Kyuubi's chakra calling for me to come. They had an air of superiority from the moment of their birth, which was nearly as bad as that of the Uchiha. Having our Kitsune blood in our veins made us all feel ashamed. Hinata isn't like that. Her family may have been awful, but I've never met someone who is so devoted to and considerate of others. Furthermore, notice how she didn't even bat an eye when you were sizing her up. The Myobu reminded Naruto, she has you to protect her, of course she'd feel secure. Naruto simply shook his head and grinned. You, not her, were protected by that move. Hinata, she could probably knock you on your ass. The woman was trying to conceal her smile from the compliments she was receiving by turning her head away. In her typically shy voice, she answered, I wouldn't do that. She is your mate, and she will eventually become as strong as you are, but I don't understand why she hasn't developed more Hanyu features to match yours. She ought to have a chakra display on her head that resembles your ears. Tell me, can you sense your mate's presence in the back of your mind? Oh, no, I don't feel that way. Are you Hinata? No, I would remember something like that. And you made it after biting? Both of them blushed and coughed when they remembered that last action. Humans, Kitsune mate openly and frequently. Mating is as usual as you humans and your kissing. The Kitsune woman then circled Hinata several times, thinking about what might be happening. She has nice physical features and is good for a human, but I believe we should take a closer look at her body. There should be more advantages to being his mate than this. Hinata timidly admitted, well, I did get this matured body from the bite. The fox slammed her fist onto her palm and yelled, oh, then that's it, you guys are still young, right, like how old? 15 or 14? 12. That's undoubtedly it, then. Even we are unsure of the other peculiarities, but I'm sure Kurama told you about some of the peculiar ways Hanyu mature. With a little more time, you will undoubtedly acquire the Hanyu features. Does their transformation seem typical? Tsunade interrupted the discussion to ask. How? The Kitsune pondered. Hinata restated her earlier statement, saying, I changed almost instantly from my 12-year-old self to this body. It was quite painful. It shouldn't have happened that way. It's strange. The transformation should have taken around a month. Perhaps your Hanyu blood only underwent a partial transformation at that time because it wasn't fully activated. Yes, Kurama had that thought. Not really wanting to bring up the transformation aspect, Naruto reassured, I suppose Chan just wanted to check her out from the human side of things. So, did Kurama. Chan explain to you how to use Kitsune magic? Returning to a topic that would be far more engaging for both of them, the Myobu asked. We heard about it but were told to get used to how our bodies are currently before getting into that, Hinata said. Yes, normally, but based on our brief interaction, I can tell Naruto is not using that Bijou chakra properly. You waste so much of it on intimidation, even though it is very powerful and intimidating. You will have a fresh perspective on chakra and be able to come up with a new method of using your actual power once you have mastered Kitsune magic. That's fantastic, but how can we acquire it? Naruto muttered aloud. A sword isn't really a good teacher. Hey, The group carried on talking after the Kyuubi's protest was ignored. The young blonde's expression brightened as she said, "I could teach you, if you'd like." "Really? That would be fantastic. Unknown location?" Blackness encircled a small fox as it instinctively navigated a labyrinth of stony paths, sniffing the air every few feet to ensure he was headed in the right direction, turning one final corner and entering a large room, which was only indicated by the diminished echo from his footsteps. Tamamo. Sama. The little copper-colored fox stood beneath the large red eyes that blinked and turned to face the person speaking to him, peering out from the cave's darkness. The fox shivered in the great being's presence and began his report. "Myobu. Sama has made contact with the Hanyu and intends to train him and his mate in kitsune magic." "His partner? Another Hanyu?" a loud, booming voice yelled. "Yes, sir. This female appears to have already finished the mating ritual and was highly compatible." "What about their eyes? Did they belong to that group?" "I believe so. The females were abnormally light in color." "Great. Where were they going?" "Konoha." A faint laugh echoed around Tamamo. "I see. Now is the moment to attack. Those mixed breed abominations will finally be exterminated from the world." The copper fox appeared tiny in comparison as he scrambled to keep up with the giant steps, but the great fox emerged from the labyrinth of caves, displaying its fur darker than night, even darker than its heart. "Assemble the other Nagatsune and get ready for combat." With a low rumbling growl, the large black fox hit the ground with the combined force of its 8 tails, saying, "We have located the mixed breeds. The abominations will be cleaned up." Soon after, Naruto and his sizable group of women arrived outside the gates of Konoha. The intense heat of the day was waning, and the sun's light was still disappearing from the horizon. A light wind passed by, carrying with it an odd odor that was reminiscent of the sulfur from explosives. With that distinct smell, he leapt back and landed in front of Hinata in a guarding formation just as a string of rockets burst into the air, exploding into brilliant shades of blue, red, and orange. He exhaled in relief. Fireworks. Since she had only been able to enjoy a celebration from her bedroom, Hinata squealed with joy at the chance to see them in public with other people. "What's happening?" the kitsune woman asked. The new Hokage became enraged and said, "Jiraiya, that guy always finds a way to get women out to party." As Tsunade had anticipated, it was a celebration of her arrival as Hokage, organized by the Toad Sannin, and the group was soon greeted by hundreds of villagers, who were already well into a drinking party. The inebriated citizens cheered and offered various forms of alcohol, which caused Tsunade to begin glowing. Knowing that once the woman began to celebrate, there wouldn't be a stop until the sun rose, Shizune urged, later Tsunade. "Sama." The villagers began to calm down after the initial onslaught, but many of the younger population were now gathered, trying to get the attention of the 2 ninja, who accompanied the Sannin and her attendant. Tsunade sighed in disappointment and had to decline, even though she had promised to return after checking in. He had been the demon boy for years, but now the villagers didn't even recognize him as such and treated him like a real human being, so it was becoming very strange for Naruto to see them actually want to talk to him and shake his hand. Hinata ran up to him and held his arm tightly to her body when she saw his face glow in the attention. She was happy that everyone was acknowledging him, but she also noticed the looks the females gave him, which made her want to be possessive. Shizune sighed in satisfaction when they arrived at the Hokage administration building without drinking, and Hiruzen looked up from setting up his pipe, grinned at the group, and took a puff. At last, they left the boisterous celebration behind and entered the much quieter building. "Tsunade, excellent timing. So you're going to accept the Hokage title?" Exhaling smoke into the air, he asked. "I know the answer, of course, but I just wanted to hear it from her." The Sandame turned to face the Hanyu couple and grinned and nodded. "A week ago, I would have said no without a second thought, but this blonde brat made things more interesting, so I think I will watch over this village until he can prove he is worthy to take over for me." He moaned as he forced himself to stand up and turn his attention to the blonde woman. "Well, Naruto, it would appear that you have found a few more people to support you in your dream. Now then," he offered the woman his hat after carefully removing it. After she accepted the ceremonial hat and made her way to the door, the elderly man patted her shoulder and said, "Good luck, Godem Hokage. Organizing the Chunin exams is your first task. I'll let you handle it." "Really? Already at work?" With a sigh, Tsunade went to the Hokage's desk and put down the big hat before beginning to go through the papers that were neatly arranged on the large surface. When she took out the exam detail from the stack and saw the date, her eyes widened. "Get moving. It will happen in 3 weeks." She put her face in her hands and moaned. "How did I get myself into this situation?" Naruto appeared perplexed by her behavior. "Hi Chan, could you tell me more about these Chunin exams?" did he ask. "I'll probably tell you after lunch tomorrow. Bring Hinata to the hospital, and I'll perform the examination," she requested. In the hopes that her flushed cheeks wouldn't reveal the exam specifics, she nodded, "Right. Yeah, okay. See ya tomorrow." Naruto and Hinata left the office, and the Kitsune yokai met them outside. After returning to the joyous village, the three of them made their way to the Hyuga estate. With each step, more of the expansive complex came into view until they were in front of the entrance. As they entered the estate, all of the Hyuga halted their activities and looked up, sensing that something unusual had happened. Hinata recognized the majority of them as members of the branch family, but they were all wearing a look of relief on their faces and their foreheads were uncovered, displaying the lack of their seal. "The manor's rulers have come," one yelled, signaling their arrival for everyone on the estate to see. Knowing a big deal was already being made, Naruto whispered jokingly, "Maybe we should have gone in through the window again." Heishi and the other clan elders then appeared, bowing their heads as if they were greeting royalty. As was customary, Hinata said, "We have returned, father," when she saw her father. He responded, "We are pleased to have your safe return. Yours too, Naruto. Sama." Naruto felt uneasy at the high level of honorific. As he candidly told them, "Yeah, thanks and all, but leave off that Sama stuff, it makes me feel uncomfortable." "Alright, Naruto-san, could you tell me who you brought along?" Well, she is the current Myobu of the Kitsune yokai." The eyes of the clan elders were filled with surprise. "Alright, then welcome. Is there anyone who could take her to the guest house?" Soon after, a male Hyuga showed up and gestured for her to follow him. "So, should I lead you two to your rooms now?" With an odd smile on his face, as if he were obviously concealing something, Heishi asked. "Well, chambers? Okay." Hinata had been sneaking out of her window and not seeing most of the estate lately, so it was all too strange to be walking through her old home in this way. It was almost foreign to her now. They soon turned a corner and she saw a newly built building standing in front of them where none had previously existed. It was still covered in sawdust and a little bit of construction debris, indicating that it had just been completed. Heishi bowed once more, left the couple alone, and made no attempt to show Naruto to another room, demonstrating his continued support for their relationship. "This one is yours. Breakfast is at 6. Naruto remarked jokingly. "Well, it can't be worse than my old apartment." He opened the door and was astounded by the room that was shown to him. It was sparsely decorated, but despite its small size, it felt open and airy, and the wooden floors and high vaulted ceilings added to the feeling of luxury and space. Hinata approached the large bed in the middle of the room and fell forward onto the plush coverings, snuggling into the thick blankets. She was still lying on the bed when she felt large hands caress her back, gently pressing down around her shoulders and sliding down her back. She groaned in protest when the caressing ceased and turned back for a reason. "What? Do you want me to go on?" She encouraged him to begin again with a smile and a drowsy nod of her head. He leaned forward and found her pink lips, pulling her into a long, deep kiss as he slowly massaged her lips and reached for her jacket's zipper tag, easing it down, then slipping off the small outerwear. He looked down at her gorgeous body and had to do his best not to take her right then and there. "Alright, stand up then." She gave him a perplexed look and slowly slid off the bed and faced him. Hinata laughed at his command and his slight embarrassment, and she threw off the rest of her clothes and lay down on the bed, wearing only her Hite.8, eagerly awaiting her mate's reaction when he saw her in that state. "Lay down on the bed, and I'll take care of you." Between giggles, she called out, "Okay, I'm ready." He turned to see her entire toned and smooth body, her head turned so she could see the expression on his face, and she gestured for him to approach with her hand, enjoying the lustful look in his eyes. He rushed across the room and said, I'm going to lock the door." With a quick click, the door was locked, and he threw off his jacket as he went. He stalked toward her, making her wait, and then he reached out and slid his hand across her pale flesh, stopping with his hand firmly on her butt. He then leapt up onto the bed, straddled her hips to readily reach her back, and began applying force to her muscles in a rhythmic manner. He worked her shoulders, then moved down further to get her upper, middle, and lower back. As he worked her muscles around her sexy dimples of Venuses, or butt dimples as some call them, she moaned and sighed without responding to his comment, saying only, "Wow, your muscles feel knotted up." He said softly, a little tender. He reduced the pressure to release the tense muscles, and she sighed again as he ran his palms from her lower back to her shoulders. This continued for several minutes until Hinata's reaction was lessened and her muscles felt relaxed. He rolled off her, signaling the end of her massage, and she twisted her neck to face her partner, snickering when she saw the odd expression on his face. She rolled to her side and exposed her entire frontal nudity to him, lying like that for a short while, clearly teasing him with her flirtatious pose. She slowly raised her hand and gestured to his waist. She laughed as the bold remark caused her face to flush. "I think we should take care of that. How about?" When she finally released him, a smile spread across her pursed lips as her hand wrapped around his neck and firmly pulled him in for a kiss, drowning out his justification. She gave him a cute little growl and jumped on him, saying, "Let's not worry about that. I can't really stop after all this anyways." He growled back, rolled her onto her back, gazed down at her ravenous face, and quickly gave her the affection she wanted. The following day, after breakfast, the Kitsune trio sat in the closest training area to the Hyuga estate, with the two women sitting beneath the lone tree near the entrance to the grounds, their hair dancing in the cool summer breeze. Hinata's dark hair glistening with the angle of the sun's rays, something that would have been worth painting if there had been an artist nearby. Naruto separated his gaze from his mate and began working on his training idea, which had come to him shortly after his intense training session with Hinata the night before. Nearly 100 clones crowded the training grounds, each holding a sword in one hand. They all simultaneously unshed the blades, displaying a variety of weapons that matched the number of clones. The many blades then transformed into a basic katana with a dull-looking blade and a rounded tip. Half of the clones split off from the group and faced each other, and they all silently began practicing the basic kata of Kenjutsu Jiraiya had told him about. 5 minutes later, they all felt warmed up, halted their practice swings, let out a loud cry, and began attacking with one-on-one combat. "What's happening here?" A soft voice called out, and the two women seated there turned to see a girl watching the sword play with great interest. "What brought you here, Ten-Ten-san?" Hinata explained. "Naruto-kun is practicing Kenjutsu." "Oh, just call me Ten-Ten, please." She paused her response to the question and continued to observe the exchange. "I've never liked those honorific titles. I was passing by when I heard weapons clashing, and when it deals with weaponry, I've just gotta see it." "Are you a person who uses weapons?" With little knowledge gained from their prior interaction, Hinata inquired. "Yes, but primarily with ranged weapons. I've never engaged in close-quarters swordplay. It requires a great deal of training to use properly, and even a small mistake could be fatal. No, I prefer to take them out gradually while keeping a safe distance." "Is sword fighting really that much riskier than what you do?" In the hopes that her boyfriend wouldn't find what she was doing too risky, Hinata inquired. "Look at how that one is trying to fight like a show off," she said abruptly, pointing to a pair facing each other. They saw as one clone whirled around to attack the other, only to have the other slit its back. "Yeah, I see it. Well, you're out of there if you do that in a real fight." Tenten's remark demonstrated that she was unaware of the extent of Naruto's training. "He's not bad, but I see a lot of those clones doing those flashy moves, so this training is worthless." "Really, Ten-Ten? If you would be so kind as to hit one of those clones with a kunai, you will see just how Naruto-kun is training," Hinata said with a knowing smile. Yeah, sure." She pulled out a kunai and skillfully hit one of the clones in the back of the neck, eliminating it from the world. The rest of the group paused for a moment and resumed their activities, and the ones doing the dazzling stunts no longer employed that technique. "Are those clones of the shadow? I've heard that shadow clones can transport their memories back to the original, but I've never heard of them acting like a hive mind," Ten-Ten said incredulously. Before being interrupted by a touch from her Kitsune neighbor, Hinata began. "It's from his bloodline allows that distinct quality." She didn't lie. She simply concealed the fact that the Kitsune blood in him contributes a strange communication network, akin to a pack, and that once they mature further, she will be able to tune into that pack mind as well. "We were shocked to discover that it was training as well, but this speeds things up considerably." "So why doesn't he use sharpened blades? Since that's how it operates, it would be more effective." Hinata said, "True, but the real one is among them. Then just have him stand to the side and lets the rest go at it. The clones will then become irate that he is watching them work and doing nothing. The way his clones usually operate is a little complicated," the Hyuga retorted. "I suppose I get it, but will you just sit here and kill them one by one until they're gone?" Hinata added, "Or until a set time limit is reached." The Hyuga threw another kunai out and knocked down yet another clone, proving to the genin that her initial assumption was accurate. "I assume you're here to help with the Byakugan so you don't hit the real one and get hit?" "Correct again. While I'll be watching to see how his training goes, I'd like to know if any of you are taking the tests." "I don't know yet, we have an appointment with Tsunade. Sama after lunch, and that is one of the topics. Are you guys really already using your first names? Ten inquired, wishing she could be that close to her hero. Yeah, I guess, it just ended up like that when we were traveling together. Wait, she was brought back then by you guys? Yes, though it was mostly Naruto-kun who convinced her to be Hokage. Okay. Well, I'll make sure that if we end up taking the exam together that I stay away from you too. The young genin waved and smiled before trotting off into the village, saying, sure, good luck Ten. Hinata smiled and looked back at Naruto and his training. Welcome Jonin. Tsunade said, her office crowded with the village's Jonin, who were actively training a group of genin. As you are all aware, the Chunin exams are coming up, and managing them is my first responsibility as Hokage. I would like to know if there are any Jonin present who would suggest their teams for the tests before we go into the specifics of the test itself. Please declare your team and come forward. Yuhi Kurenai, and I recommend my team of Kiba, Shino and Sakura for the exams. Sarutobi Asuma, and I recommend the new generation of Ino, Shika, Sho for the exams. A team typically consists of 3 people, but my protege Uchiha Sasuke is more than capable of making an appearance in the Chunin selections by himself. As he stood rigidly at attention, Guy exclaimed, my team shall show their youthfulness in this year's exam as well. Remembering him as a child, Tsunade sighed, it seems he hasn't changed. When she noticed that no one else was taking, she said, okay, anyone else? Well, I'm not going to drastically change the format from the previous exams, so you will still need 3 team members to compete, so I have arranged for 2 strong genin to accompany Sasuke. Kakashi interrupted, as long as they won't hold him back. She smiled sternly and said, I'm sure they could manage it if he did, but you should worry more about him holding them back. Just so you know, Sasuke is probably qualified to be Jonin. He has even given me a hard time once. Should he awaken the Mangekyou, he will be unstoppable. The copy that ninja returned. With a casual wave, she said, I'm sure you will. Now back to the exams. This year, I'm thinking of combining the first and second tests to make things go faster. After nearly 5 hours of non-stop fighting, about 50 clones remained intact. It was like 15 days of non-stop training when you factor in the knowledge that was added by the clones. He ought to be proficient with the sword given his level of experience. I believe that should be enough for now. We don't want him getting spent before I start teaching you both the basics of Kitsune magic. The Myobu was interrupted. Hinata let out a sigh. She could finally talk to him this time, which was a welcome change from watching him passively as she used to do. True, Hinata gave in and then called out to her partner. Lunchtime. The mention of food caused the Narutos to glance over and smile. When the original stomach began to growl, the clones vanished. Hinata prepared a delicious spread for them that was ideal for a Kitsune appetite and included a variety of meats and berries. As Hinata finished the last of the lunch she had prepared, Naruto asked, what time do we need to see Ba-chan? With a gasp, the Hyuga woman leapt to her feet. She stuffed the remnants of their picnic into her bag and began scurrying down the street, shouting, hurry, we're going to be late. Naruto slowed as soon as they stepped through the hospital's doors, and the Hokage's gentle face welcomed them. She was impatiently tapping her foot while seated in one of the waiting area's chairs with her legs crossed. Hinata apologized, Hokage. Sama, I hope we aren't late. He wanted to object, but his friend's soft nod persuaded him to sit and wait in spite of his dislike of being by himself in a hospital. No Hinata, you were right on time, I just sat down a second ago. Naruto, you stay here, we'll be back after the exam is over. Tsunade led the women into the exam room and told the front desk nurse, we'll be using exam room number 3. Tsunade instructed the young woman to change into a medical gown that was hanging on the wall behind her after closing the door and drawing a curtain. After hearing the sound of fabric shifting for a short while, she was dressed in the uncomfortable clothing. After settling in, she yelled, I'm ready. The tiny Hyuga was resting on the exam table, wriggling to settle in, when the curtain was drawn back open. On either side of her, the 2 older women prepared to examine her. When the flimsy gown was pulled back to reveal Hinata's flawless skin, she closed her eyes. Before her hands began to glow with her chakra for the remainder of the exam, Tsunade began by pressing in specific spots on her abdomen and checking her pulse. As the chakra began to wane, Tsunade remarked, this is quite remarkable. You look like a 20-year-old woman in perfect health, but your bone density is so high that you could likely break a bone with twice the force of a normal person. 20. But Hinata was shocked to learn how old she was being told she was. You'll most likely need to change the way you think. It would be hard for her to believe it herself. Your mental maturity and obviously, your physical maturity are in line with a 20-year-old, she corrected. But a few weeks ago Kurama told us we were about 18. The Myobu reminded them, maybe back then, but you are still aging at a rapid rate due to your Hanyu blood. The good news is that your Hanyu features should appear in a week or so, if not sooner. You should begin to notice the connection with your partner as well as the enhancement of your senses. So soon? Will it be painful? Not at all. Sometimes you'll just look at your reflection and it will be there, or you might wake up one day with a slight headache from processing the new information from your senses. So, are you certain you still want that other issue resolved? Sensing that she needed to finish, Tsunade asked, and Hinata nodded her head while blushing. Not wanting to upset her, Tsunade told her, it gets personally invasive, most get taught to perform it on their own, but it would take about 3 months to master it. Intrusive on a personal level. Nothing strange, is it? I don't care either way. Just go ahead, I don't want to worry about it, Hinata said, shaking her head. I can learn the method from you later. Okay. Hinata tensed as Tsunade pulled back her gown further, revealing her lower half. The medic placed her hand on the flesh covering her pelvis and began to rub it in small clockwise circles, pausing at one point to apply a gentle flow of chakra, causing a small spiral to appear on her skin for a brief moment before disappearing completely. And you're done, she said, draping the gown over her body. Without considering the information she had given, she responded, thanks, that was a little embarrassing since it wasn't Naruto-kun. How often has he done that, too? Tsunade made fun of it. Tsunade laughed as she sidestepped the question, her face flushed. I think it's time to get dressed. She closed the curtain and sat down with the Myobu, saying, you didn't have to answer a question like that. So, how does the relationship she will develop with Naruto work? It should begin by simply giving her that uncanny feeling that she is being watched. That kind of thing. They might even be able to communicate and even share chakras if they are truly compatible. Really? If that's the case, would Hinata be able to match his level of strength? Yes, that is the Kitsune clan's secret talent. Many people oppose allowing our blood to mix with that of other people because of this as well. The human immediately acquires all of the demon's power when a Kitsune Yukai mates with them. It upsets our clan's equilibrium. At this point, the curtain opened once more, revealing Hinata, who was still wearing rosy cheeks. She was escorted back into the waiting area, where Naruto was sitting impatiently, and she burst out laughing when she noticed him inverted in one of the chairs. What are you doing? Through her laughter, she inquired. Without considering how he appeared to others, he responded, I was bored, so I decided to look at the world from the other side. I have to say it is different. Now about the Chunin exams, Tsunade remarked, actually, you're the one who is different. Yes? Naruto flipped himself to sit in his chair normally after his curiosity was aroused. In 3 weeks, at precisely 11 a.m., the Chunin exam will begin behind the academy. 3 members of your team are required to enter. Third, but we only have 2? He raised, demonstrating that he was at least able to count. I was approaching that. Sasuke will be your third. When Naruto heard his name, his smile vanished. That idiot. There was nothing he could do but accept the Hokage's reminder. Yeah, I never really saw eye to eye with the Uchihas either, but he's the only other genin ready for the exams. Okay fine, but if he pisses either of us off, I can't guarantee his safety. Tsunade stood up, removed her necklace, and put it around his neck, saying, I will entrust this special necklace to you, so make sure to come back a Chunin. Understood, and one more thing. Of course, Chan, I'll definitely become Chunin, I swear. His eyes briefly flashed red in time with his new pledge. Naruto got up and took Hinata's hand before yanking her briskly back towards the training area. Well, we should get back to training, you never know what powerful person may be there. The vixen remarked, sure is energetic, and then sauntered out of the hospital after them. Shortly after the two began sparring, the Myobu arrived at their training ground and was shocked to see that Hinata had something she didn't have at the hospital. Then she called out, capturing their full attention, okay, I think it is time to start training both of you in Kitsune magic. Both? I believe that Hanyu features had to be acquired by Hinata first. As he looked up and stared at her head, searching for anything out of place, he said, yes, you are right Naruto, look closely at your mate's head. Her hair twitched slightly, and then slowly, 2 tiny, fox-like ears appeared on top of her head. What is the duration of her fox ears? She shrieked as he asked aloud, and when he felt the top of her head, he discovered 2 tiny protuberances, which, of course, weren't actually ears but rather a display of their Hanyu abilities. Like you, she is now a full full-fledged Han-yu. Because the demonic blood is diluted over generations, she won't be nearly as strong as you, but that's only for her. You two can become much stronger if you are completely in harmony. As the couple continued to discuss Hinata's ears, the fox thought, strange though, it should have taken longer. Maybe, just maybe she might have the power to draw her mate's abilities onto herself. Intriguing. Do they appear strange? She covered the ethereal ears with her hands and asked, half ignoring the Myobu's explanation. She blushed and turned her head away, saying, nope, you don't even notice them. You must already be using kitsune magic to hide them, but they are cute. Thank you, Naruto.kun. Alright, young ones, back to your kitsune training. Right. They both nodded, speaking in perfect unison. Once you've mastered it, you'll become stronger than ever before, but it will be challenging and frustrating. You two now create a large number of clones, but maintain a 1-to-1 ratio. And tomorrow, we will take the training into the forest. They both stood together and performed their jutsu precisely on time, at which point they became aware of their peculiar behavior. Once again, they both said simultaneously, I think something is weird. The Myobu shook her head at the pair's constantly changing skills. It appears that you two get along well, but I had expected this to happen later with additional training. You are experiencing each other's thoughts because your bond as mates has become stronger than usual. You will eventually stop saying the same thing over and over again, but for now, let's concentrate on managing your kitsune chakra. The weeks of training went by, and the day of the Chunin exams finally arrived. They trained outside of Konoha, where they faced their first challenge of adopting an animal lifestyle and embracing nature. While many people wouldn't consider spending a week in nature to be much more than a vacation where you pack lunches and snacks, this was the real thing, and by the second half of the first day, it was quite an eye-opener to be permitted to wear only the clothes on their backs for the duration of the training. It seemed like fun training at the time, but that second week was actually the beginning of the real training. As the second week drew to a close, the Myobu finally began to get a sense of how Hinata the two were progressing as they do so quickly. It was their subconscious connection. By the time the second week arrived, the couple was back to laughing and enjoying their newly discovered joy of running through the forest as fast as they can. It really came down to a system similar to the shadow clones, but the experiences were shared with two real people instead, a truly remarkable learning tool. Hinata would grasp a concept of her training, and Naruto would realize the same thing the next moment. It was something truly unique with the pair that they could operate in that way, but that made training them much more efficient. At the conclusion of the training session, the two had learned as much as they could in the brief time allotted, and while they were undoubtedly stronger than before, there were still a few things that needed to be worked out and finished before the Kyuubi Hanyu's full potential could be realized. The Myobu took her leave, recognizing that her work was done for the time being, and left the two to reintegrate into the human world. Although it had been difficult to resist some of those natural urges, Naruto and Hinata appeared to be doing a respectable job of maintaining their human way of life as they walked together towards the academy on the day of the Chunin exams. It was a clear day with no clouds in the sky, making it the ideal day for enjoying the outdoors. When they arrived on the academy's grounds, they encountered their teammate, who was absent-mindedly staring at a tree in an obvious attempt to annoy them by deliberately ignoring them. He only acknowledged them when they were directly in front of him, leaving him with no other choice. Hey Sasuke, have you finished moping yet? Naruto, who didn't like how the Uchiha had become even more conceited with Kakashi's training, said, it's time to go. Just don't hold me back. Yeah. Sasuke turned and began to walk, making sure to highlight the katana on his back to try to outdo the blonde's somewhat diminutive blade. The two shook their heads and followed him. Did Hinata grow taller? Observing the boy's increased size, Naruto questioned. I thought we were the only ones with accelerated growth. He does appear a little older. Could it be a growth spurt or his training? The trio walked around the backside of the academy where a large group of genin were waiting for the exam to begin. They were strewn everywhere, sitting, standing, and even lying on the ground, all trying to pass the time. Yeah, maybe, he replied, still believing that something else was wrong with him or that Kakashi had a secret method of training. Naruto said, much too loudly, so these are the other genin. Everyone looked at him angrily. Sasuke scolded, good going loser, now they're all paying attention to us. The Hanyu simply shrugged. So, are you afraid? Did he ask, HN? After laughing at the angry expression, Naruto looked around a little, feeling oddly aware that something was wrong with the current state of affairs. He glanced at Sasuke, who appeared to be absorbed in his own world and didn't notice anything, and then he looked at Hinata, who simply nodded and smiled, understanding exactly what he was asking, before using her Byakugan to scan the area and spotting a slight agitation in the grasses around the academy. This is not a place for meetings. Sasuke turned on his Sharingan and nodded grudgingly in agreement as Hinata whispered, "Besides, we were told it started at 11. It's about 10 past now." Even to the untrained eye, the trail they followed was clear, with broken branches and chopped underbrush advertising the way like a billboard. Naruto agreed, and the three quietly moved away from the genin that was waiting and headed in the direction indicated by the tracks and marks purposefully left behind. Is this path too simple? After considering the matter, Naruto inquired, and Hinata turned her eyes back on. Hinata told them, "There's a group of 3 chunin ahead, looks like it's a trap. Do we not want to spring it if it is a trap?" In response to his mate's information, he inquired, "We can't expect to become one ourselves if we can't defeat 3 chunin, can we?" "You have a strategy?" Sasuke inquired, gradually coming to terms with the fact that these two were not at all like the classmates he had known. "I considered sending 3 clones in disguise as each of us. We take advantage of the opening to defeat the chunin when they attack." "Are you certain that using clones is smart?" With a sly smile, Naruto responded to Sasuke's query by using his powers, and in a split second, 3 identical clones were staring back at them. "Happy? I suppose that's a yes. When they attack the clones, that's the cue to attack." They all nodded in agreement and vanished into the forest surrounding the chunin. "Your target will be whichever one attacks the clone in your likeness." There was a large chain link fence behind the chunin, with weeds and vines growing up through the interlocking pieces of metal, and even larger trees, many centuries old, dwarfing the high fence with their dark, almost otherworldly appearance. The 3 clones continued down the trail, unfazed by the ruse, and emerged into a larger grassy area. One chunin commented, "Look, another group of genin who can't make heads or tails of anything," after observing the trio arrive. Another said, "Let's greet them properly." The last one laughed, "Lamb to the slaughter." Since genin couldn't learn any real cloning techniques, well, normal genin, the 3 clones took off towards the chunin, displaying an obvious frontal attack, creating a false sense of predictability. Just as the chunin were about to attack the fakes, the original 3 jumped from their hiding spots and attacked from behind them while they were occupied from the front. They realized their mistake and turned to the ones behind them, completely omitting the danger from their front. The clones immediately realized their mistake when they jumped onto their backs and held them in a tight headlock, immobilizing the real 3. "Go ahead." Before they could land the first blow and knock out the chunin, a female voice shouted out in the distance. They turned to face the voice and saw a woman with short, nearly purple hair staring at them. She was wearing a tan jacket that hung down to her knees and was open in the front, so little could be seen of her form because it was barely concealed by the fishnet style armor. She said, "My name is Madarashi Anko. You 3, follow me, quickly." The 3 shrugged, let go of the chunin, and trailed the woman to the chain link fence, where they were out of sight. "You are currently the 4th team to pass the first section of this test. Delivering something to the Hokage in the tower located in the center of Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death, is the second part of your mission." She produced 2 tiny scrolls, each of which was unique. The catch is that you only get 1 scroll handed to you, even though you will need to deliver both to the Hokage. One of the other teams in the forest has the other one. Anko nodded and almost threw one of the scrolls at Naruto, but he tucked it away in his pocket and watched as Jonin slipped the other into her jacket pocket. He laughed at the thought that came to him just as Hinata stepped in front of him. "So we're having the current number of teams, yet we don't know how many teams will even start, forcing us to attack one of the 3 already within the forest," Sasuke said while assessing the situation. "I don't trust you, so give me the scroll. Everything you've ever been in charge of is always lost. You lost all of our food on that final mission, and we nearly starved to death." She snarled at him and made a violent attempt to put her hand in his pocket, but he angrily brushed it away. "Leave me alone." She had a strange sense of humor when it came to teams breaking up, and she was enjoying the show, but she was getting angry at the fact that a guy was treating a woman that way. He shouted while pushing her much too roughly to treat a woman, causing her to stumble backwards and crash into the Jonin who was enjoying the show. He kicked her shoe for emphasis and spat back at the Hyuga woman, saying, "I'm keeping the scroll." "Perhaps I ought to accept the scroll?" Sasuke made an offer. "Fuck you. You losers coming, or am I going to do all of this by myself?" Naruto shot back, making his way furiously to the forest's entrance. "Up yours." Before standing and furiously shoving her hands into her pockets, Hinata yelled back, catching up to him quickly and narrowly escaping Sasuke in the process. She walked away from the gate, laughing at how disorderly the team was and wondering how far they'd get like that. She shook her head and shoved her hands into her jacket pockets, which made her eyes widen. Good luck. Anko laughed and closed the gate behind them. A sly little liar, she yelled, then started laughing uncontrollably. When Naruto abruptly stopped in a small clearing, the three of them took off into the forest, running at a good pace, and Hinata landed next to him smiling, followed by the emotionless Sasuke. What in the world was that? Sasuke insisted, thinking that the two of them would make a good team, but what he was witnessing was anything but a healthy relationship, a couple, or teamwork. Hinata, you got it, right? She nodded, took the other scroll from her pocket, and waved it in the air as Naruto asked knowingly. He picked her up and gave her a quick kiss before setting her down, cheering, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The two turned to Sasuke, who was obviously surprised that they had stolen a scroll from a Jonin. All in a perfectly staged farce that was carried out without any exchange of words or visual cues. How? All he sputtered out was that. Hinata and I have awesome teamwork. He stopped there and took the lead, racing through the forest to the central tower without stopping to find another team. They reached the central tower well in time for a late lunch. Ba. Chan, special delivery, Naruto joyfully declared, hurling the two scrolls at the blonde Hokage, who jumped when the team appeared out of nowhere. How did you arrive here so quickly? As she examined the scrolls, she inquired. Naruto explained, as if it were simple, it was easy. We stole the second scroll from Anko and ran all the way here. Tsunade laughed at the news and said, so that was what she meant by sneaky bastards. She only hoped that the Jonin appreciated the theft because if they didn't, she would get even, and you never wanted to be the target of one of Anko's retaliations. You still have to remain here, so feel free to rest or train. It will be almost 2 days before the test's end is announced. Before putting the scrolls away, the Hokage told them, you will be given a room to sleep in until the time for the next part of the test comes. Sasuke took advantage of the situation to spy on his teammate and followed Naruto as he hurried out of the office. Tsunade was in and headed to the lowest floor of the tower with Hinata to resume his training. Okay. Great. I'll take to a bit of training. I still haven't gotten a grasp on something I've been trying. For approximately an hour, Sasuke watched as Naruto performed basic taijutsu kata, kenjutsu, and then the Rasengan. Sasuke had hoped to use his Sharingan to copy any jutsu they had, but he discovered that everything they used was unique to them and could only be accomplished with practice and focus. He watched until Naruto sat next to Hinata, both of them closing their eyes in a sort of meditation, and he repositioned himself, stepping on a dry twig, causing a small crack. That was enough, but seeing the same black slits in the pale eyes of a Hyuga was enough to make the Uchiha feel uneasy. Both pairs of eyes opened, almost frightening him. Naruto appeared to be staring at him with blood-red slitted eyes and a red shadow streaking across his eyelids. Her eyes were shadowed similarly to his, but with a pale lavender hue, and their ethereal ears were more noticeable in that state, colored similarly to their eyelids. Ignoring the Uchiha's presence, Naruto muttered, I'm going to try it now. Hinata nodded and activated her Byakugan, and orange flames began to flare up, consuming his hands, arms, and shoulders until they nearly covered his chest. Then, a dark red chakra burst outward, making the atmosphere heavy and unbreathable. The orange flames quickly retreated, and the red quickly cloaked his body instead. Unable to cope with the demonic presence, Sasuke collapsed to his knees and began coughing. Naruto withdrew the chakra and returned to his normal self. Very nearly, he yelled, half with delight and half with disappointment. He recalled what she had just seen when she said, you were almost there, Naruto-kun. The demon chakra just overwhelmed your human chakra, knocking off the balance. He nodded his head in agreement as he watched the memory in his mind and said, yeah, it's just that the two chakras aren't the same, so when you pull out the demon chakra, you need almost twice as much to counter it. She urged, keep it up and I know you'll get there. He looked at the unconscious genin on the ground and said, thanks Hinata, I couldn't have gotten this far without you. Now maybe we should get Sasuke to Ba. Chan. He looks a little out of it. He got up and walked over to the fallen Uchiha, throwing the unconscious body over his shoulder before heading back into the tower. As they passed through the main area of the building where the teams would arrive, the two of them caught a glimpse of the second team to finish as they arrived. Behind them stood a shorter man with red hair and a gourd on his back. His eyes were closed, as if he didn't care, but he had dark rings around them, as if he hadn't slept in months. And a man wearing an odd black suit, covered in various types of face paint, looked quite pleased as he shouted at a tall blonde girl holding a huge fan. He enthusiastically reaffirmed, we're first, I know we are Tamari. She huffed angrily back, we better be or you're getting it for taking such a long break. He objected, saying, "But I really had to go." The third one said, "Shut up, or I'll kill you both." After the banter had annoyed him enough, his sleep-deprived eyes slowly opened and he looked straight at the Hanyu couple. For the first time in his life, he felt Shukaku tremble inside of him, and he wanted to know why. With a new sense of apprehension, the genin walked past his other teammates and approached the pair, deeming them the source. The closer he got, the more he felt the need to flee, solidifying his perception of them. "How did you beat us here? Who are you?" he inquired. From his house in the sword, Kurama issued a warning. "Be careful, that one is an unstable Jinchuriki." "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. How about you?" "The Sans Gaara. Mother is scared of you. What are you doing?" "I wouldn't normally talk about this in such a casual way, but since we have something in common, I'll tell you straight. After merging with the Kyuubi no Kitsune, I became a Hanyu." "You're in complete control?" With incredulity, he inquired. "More than that, all the powers are now mine. The Kyuubi's conscience isn't in me." "Is it possible to do it to me?" He posed the question with optimism. "I don't think so, well, not safely, but I'm sure there's other ways if we look." Gaara turned around and took 3 steps before stopping again, saying, "Forget it then. I will look forward to fighting you. But if you do stumble across a way, let me know." Hinata whispered to her partner, "I think that guy is a little crazy." After putting Sasuke down beside the wall and going back for a little more training, Naruto said, "Seems that way, but not completely." Seeing someone like him stoked his desire to become proficient with his new ability. Tsunade. The curvaceous Hokage turned to face the voice beckoning her from the window that overlooked the forest of death. When she saw the man who had molested her chest and vanished days earlier, she wore a frown. She growled, "Jiraiya, what brings you here, you old lech?" "You know the group I was looking into?" he inquired. Even though it was a rhetorical question, he chose to use it to introduce his next point. "The Akatsuki? Exactly. Well, it seems my spy network came through with the location of their base in a megacure, but when I got there, something was off." She tapped her foot impatiently and told him, "Just get to the point." She was always interested in the facts, and one of the many issues she had with Jiraiya was his embellished stories. The other 50 were related to his lecherous behavior. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise as she said, "Well, AIM is gone." "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "Just like I said, it is gone. Destroyed, non-existent. The whole village was razed." "Any idea how or by whom?" "Not as of yet, it was just too unusual. The neighboring villages and landowners saw no one come through the area, but to eliminate a whole village in the blink of an eye would require quite a large force. At least someone should have seen something, yet there was nothing." "I see, and what of the Akatsuki?" "Gone. Just like AIM, it seems that Itachi was seen fleeing the area, but besides him, there was no trace of the others. The leader was supposedly in the village at that time, but there is no trace of him escaping. Whatever of whoever it was took out the whole of Akatsuki." "You think it is a new enemy?" He mentioned an enemy worse than a group of missing nins from the S class, and Tsunade shuddered when he said, "Possibly, but if it is, I've got shivers just thinking about it." After some internal discussion, she finally asked, "When should we inform the AIM nin taking place in the Chunin exams?" "Actually, I'm not 100% on this, but I think the village was destroyed before the genin were able to leave." "What, are you thinking of possible infiltration?" Reluctantly, he answered, "I would approach it like that until I have more proof." Before responding, she glanced back out the window. "Well, I'd like to have that proof before we turn them loose in the remaining exams. It is your job to come up with that information or I will proceed with the exam as planned." Jiraiya jumped onto the nearest window sill and turned around after saying, "I'm on it. Just be sure to do everything in your power to protect the exams." "I understand, after all, I am the Hokage. Now go." The elderly man gave a sheepish wave before jumping out of the window to continue collecting intelligence. After being called in that morning, the Hanyu pair entered Tsunade's temporary office in the Forest of Death the next day, assisting them in finding something to do besides training and each other. She insisted, "Take a seat, you two." The couple positioned themselves and awaited the revelation of the reason for their summons. "Could you please share the outcomes of your training with me? Yesterday, I had an amazing energy and thought of you two right away." Naruto smiled shyly. "Yes, I was attempting to learn something, but I still haven't mastered it. Kitsune magic is something we've both mastered, but I'm attempting to use another power." "You've figured out the Kitsune techniques. Could you show me something?" "You get a good grasp of chakra and you can even sense people from a distance, but it's not like the word magic is used correctly, so there isn't any trick. It essentially enhances all of your standard methods. However, there is one thing we could show you. Tsunade gasped when she saw them. He turned to Hinata, who nodded in comprehension. They both closed their eyes and opened them after completing their technique. Senjutsu? Have you all mastered the use of Sage Mode? Sage Mode? Both of them asked in confusion. All right. It is the capacity to internalize and utilize chakra from nature as though it were your own. It improves recovery strength, resilience, and pretty much everything else. Sounds similar. Could it be that the development of Sage Mode was influenced by research into demon abilities? Hinata pondered. It's possible that I was quite young when I was granted the power of the Nine Tails by the Raikodu Sennin. I think the demon world is the source of at least one of your human techniques. She muttered, I thought so. What did you think? Tsunade inquired after realizing she had been cut off from the discussion. Oh, I apologize. According to the Kyuubi, I was probably right. Ninjas employ methods that are probably indigenous to demons, Hinata said. If that's the case, are summonings also demons? The Hokage thought aloud, and after swiftly going over a series of hand signals, she called forth a tiny slug, which made Naruto laugh at his idea that Tsunade could call forth a giant lion. Then she snorted, Can it? Katsuya. Indeed, Tsunade. Sama. Are you a demon? Yes, Tsunade. Sama. All right, that's settled. But what? The slug responded as if it were well known and there was nothing to conceal. All summonings are demons. But wait, why didn't I know about this earlier? She summoned her. You never asked. Hey slug thing, Naruto began, unsure of what to call it because he had a terrible name for things. Yes, Naruto.kun. Does that imply that there are additional Hanyu? With all these demons assisting people, I'm sure there are more like us. I don't know much about the demon world, but since we summonings are lesser demons and cannot transform into humanoid forms, it is not a pleasant idea to do so with a human. Hey, Kurama, why didn't you initially inform us that summonings were demons? They really ought to have known about it, Naruto thought as he questioned. You didn't ask. Yeah, thanks, for nothing. The blonde Hokage sighed and allowed her expression to droop as Hinata interrupted, saying, it is nice to talk and all, but I get the feeling that there is something bothering you Tsunade. Sama. You were very observant Hinata. There is something that is bothering me, but unfortunately I can't tell anyone about it just yet, but one thing is certain. Something big is happening in the ninja world. What does a something big mean to you? Sensing the gravity in her voice, Naruto inquired. The day you became Hanyu, something changed. I felt it even though I was not in Konoha. You too are significant to the ninja community. Remain alert. Is there anything that needs our immediate attention? Still concerned about Tsunade's attitude and the unsettling, ominous news, Hinata inquired. Possibly, I'll keep you informed as I know them. Thank you Hokage. Sama. Naruto proudly stood up and offered Hinata his hand to help her stand up, saying, Yeah, thanks Ba. Chan, if anyone shows up I'll kick their asses. He said, I think I'll start training again, I'm so pumped right now. For some reason, the thought of being at the forefront of a global revolution made him feel energized and unable to sit still. The ninja inside the tower's wall were told to gather in a room on the second floor when an announcement later that day reverberated through the tower and into the surrounding forest of death, announcing the end of that section of the exams. The Hanyu pair heard the distinct sound, or shriek, if you will, of the two well-known fangirls swooning over Sasuke as soon as he entered the designated room, saving them the trouble of finding him. After opening the door and entering, they were taken aback to discover that the second floor entrance led to a huge room that stretched from the ground floor to the second floor, with a balcony to overlook the room and a set of stairs leading down at the end of the balcony level. They laughed at how childish it now seemed from their more adult perspective. Tsunade exclaimed with a positive grin, Congratulations on passing the second part of this year's Chunin selection exam. Since we have a good-sized amount of candidates who have made it to this point, we will be holding a tournament to half the count once more, so take a look around you. Anyone could be your next opponent. As the assembled ninja began scanning their opponents, Konoha put on a strong show, with Hyuga Neji, Ten, Rock Lee, Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, Inazuka Kiba, Aburame Shino, Yamanaka Ino, Akamichi Choji, and Nara Shikamaru accounting for well over half of the field, followed by the foreigners, including Gaara, Tamari, and Kankuro from Suna, as well as an unidentified group of fighters from AIM. Each participant drew their number and was paired up on a large board at the front of the room. Now in this box in front of you, there are numbered lots. You will each draw a number from the box which will determine who your opponent is. Inazuka Kiba versus Nara Shikamaru Yamanaka Ino against Ten. Neji Hyuga vs Kankuro Rock Lee vs Tama Kitsuke. Sakamichi Choji vs Hyuga Hinata Uchiha Sasuke vs Haruno Sakura. Aburame Shino vs Uzumaki Naruto Gaara vs Nogi Naguru. Tamari vs Kugeki Nogi. Go to bed now, everyone, and get ready for your challenge tomorrow morning. Rejected. Before they filed out of the room, the young ninja turned right away and began assessing their opponents. Naruto and Hinata waited for everyone to leave, but when the last three from AIM passed them, they all stopped and gave the couple a hateful look before passing. They were, Naruto said, "Yeah, I know Kurama," as he watched the three of them leave the room. Hinata nodded in agreement with her mate's statement, "This may be a bigger fight than we thought." She, too, sensed the three's odd presence and was uncertain of the upcoming battles. The two left the room when they noticed Sakura observing the two, one, as the green-clad, active ninja Rock Lee engaged Sasuke in combat. It was odd to watch a fight that might disqualify them begin. "Fight me, Sasuke, and I'll demonstrate to you the power of perseverance," Lee screamed and then winked at Sakura, making her feel disgusted. After scoffing and leaving the ninja, Sasuke said, "You're pathetic, save it for the tournament, you'll need it." Lee became enraged and fled after him, quickly catching up to the Uchiha. Sasuke confessed to himself, "He's fast." He turned just in time to see a bandaged fist inches from his face, and his eyes widened at the realization that he was even faster than he had first believed. However, closer examination revealed that the hand around his wrist that stopped the attack was the most unexpected element. The person had to be strong and faster than both of them to stop that attack with such accuracy. Lee looked directly into the blue eyes staring at him and nodded, saying, "Lee, Sasuke isn't someone to worry about right now, there is someone else you should be worrying about." "All right, Naruto-kun, I'll skip this battle for the time being and concentrate on the next one. I'll either win or complete 300 laps around Konoha." Before letting go of his wrist, Naruto said, "That's fine, and Lee, be careful tomorrow, those AIM guys aren't pushovers." "I'll try my hardest." Lee left Sasuke and Naruto behind and took off. "How in the world did you advance so fast?" Still troubled by the fact that he intervened before he could defend himself and made it appear simple, the Uchiha asked. "Well, let's just say that I unlocked my bloodline." Sasuke turned and stormed off, saying, "Fine, if you don't want to tell me, I will beat it out of you later." Sakura looked at Naruto and was perplexed. The person she saw was not the one she had been annoyed with months earlier, but he was supposed to be. The mystery of who this guy was began to annoy her, and for a brief moment she considered whether she should have been so cruel to him, but she quickly dismissed it and ran after him. "Should we discuss them with Tsunade, Naruto-kun? The AIM nin?" Knowing what the three were, Hinata pondered. She accepted his explanation and accompanied him to their room in the tower, which was adequate for temporary sleeping quarters, with a big chair on one side and a basic bed on the other. Not much else was needed. "We shouldn't have to," this was what she was warning us about earlier. Slumping back into the chair, Naruto grinned up at his lovely mate, who smiled back at him and returned the simple gesture, squeaking when she was abruptly pulled down onto his lap, then sighed joyfully and laid her head on his shoulder as his hand caressed her back. "I've been thinking," Naruto broke the quiet moment. "Roughly?" she inquired. "You? Me?" Wondering what exactly he was thinking about, she asked, and he nodded in agreement. "Yes, I was attempting to recall every detail about you. What I remember most are your eyes. I recall those eyes observing me while I was playing my typical practical jokes while I was still in the orphanage. Later, when I prevented a couple bullies from harming a girl, those same eyes were staring up at me. I remember those eyes were always watching me when I really focused on it, but I never really connected the dots that the strange girl in the academy was the owner of those eyes. Even though I wasn't aware of it, I'm sure I knew why you were always observing me. You were like me, so I watched you. I was the clan heiress who was incapable of doing anything right, and you were viewed as the village's outcast. Our parents were absent from our lives, both yours and my mother had passed away, and my father, acted inappropriately. Given how similar those things were, I couldn't understand how you continued to be self-assured and work toward becoming the Hokage. I wanted to learn your secret so that I could replicate it because I was your opposite in this area. After years of studying you, I came to the conclusion that I couldn't replicate it, so all I wanted was to become closer to you in the hopes that it would eventually wear off on me. Did you know that the majority of that was a performance?" She laughed and nodded. "I always hoped that one day I would be able to help make that positive attitude a reality, which is why I wanted to get closer to you. However, your hope was the one thing that never changed. You inspired others to believe in their dreams and never questioned your destiny as Hokage. He retorted, I don't think I was an influence on anyone. She kissed him on the neck to emphasize her statement, you were to me. She promised that everyone would soon view you differently. You are aware that the Chunin exam's last section is held in front of the village, right? What? Does it? He inquired, clearly unaware of that specific detail. Sure does. Once everyone can see you now, there is no way that they can treat you like you once were. He gave in and said, well, if you say so, I do. They sat there together as Naruto considered everything she had said. His mind was a complete mess from everything he had experienced and recalled, but the woman in his lap was the one thing that kept everything together. Hi, Hinata. Oh well. I love you, Hinata. He whispered in her ear and closed his eyes, satisfied with her sleeping in his arms, as there was no reaction other than her steady breathing, which indicated that she was asleep. Naruto woke up the next morning with a sore neck from sleeping on the chair, but the pain soon went away when he saw Hinata's still slumbering form, with that adorable smile on her lips that seemed to sparkle in the light of the dawn. Hinata. She moaned, brushed his hand away, and then curled back into Naruto's arms as he called out and poked her tender cheek. Come on, Hinata, it's time to wake up. Sleepily, she put her arm around the back of the blonde's head and pulled herself up to kiss his cheek, complaining, I don't wanna. A couple more minutes? She returned to his grasp and pleaded. He was grinning mischievously as he hurriedly got up and threw her light body onto the empty bed, making her shriek all the way to the plush mattress. Sorry, not this time. It's not funny. Her hair was now all tangled and messed up, covering most of her face, and she grunted as she stormed off to the bathroom to get ready for the day, slamming the door behind her. She came out frowning and huffing in the chair, but he ignored her antics and took his turn, spending less than half the time in there as she did and coming out shivering. She smiled mischievously this time, and he objected, saying, Hey, you used all the hot water. Oh, was that me? Perhaps you could have shown me more consideration and we could have shared a shower. She blushed slightly and continued to hold her face in a pout. Well, excuse me, but had I been nicer to you, we'd still be doing other things caused by that co-ed shower and we wouldn't make it to the exam on time. As he led her out to the exam room, she muttered, Our matches aren't until later, so we would have had time for a round or two. She was gently pulled to her feet and saw two brilliant blue spheres staring into her eyes. She tried to maintain a frown, but the longer he looked at her, the less she could. In a matter of seconds, she was grinning and gripping his arm. She could never remain angry with him for very long. Being the last to enter the room, they were shocked to discover that every single one of the Jonin sensei was present, with the exception of Ero, Sennin and Jiraiya, who were still out on reconnaissance. Each of them was positioned in a different location, leaning on the balcony railing to gaze down at the floor where the battles were to take place. The sickly-looking man, who coughed far too much for his age, said, Well then, let's get started. I am Gecko Hayate, and I will serve as the match's proctor. As a Chunin, you should be able to determine how much force is required to eliminate your opponent without losing your life. The rules are straightforward. Subdue your opponent. It is a necessary skill because many of the missions you will be involved in will call for capture. Of course, an alternative is to force your opponent to surrender. Have any inquiries? Since there were no takers in the room, he moved forward. Alright, first up is Nara Shikamaru and Inuzuka Kiba. Will the two fighters please come down? Yes, come on, Akamaru, the vivacious Inuzuka boy yelled. Rough. As it rode down to the floor below on his head, the little white puppy responded. As he walked slowly down the stairs, Shikamaru muttered, Troublesome guy, troublesome dog, this is such a drag. Are fighters prepared for Nara Shikamaru versus Inuzuka Kiba, the first preliminary match? Hayate paused for a moment to confirm it with the fighters. Begin. All right, let's grab the sluggish one. Shikamaru stood idly and waited until the Inuzuka was nearly on him before he pulled his hands together, but Kiba took off as fast as his legs would allow him to, running straight ahead. He muttered, Kagemain no Jutsu, successful. When Kiba's movement was stopped, Akamaru jumped out from inside his jacket, growling, his fur reddish. Shikamaru was taken aback by the pup's increased speed and didn't realize that Akamaru could take special soldier pills to increase his fighting strength and speed. He silently cursed his short sight and had to move quickly to avoid being bitten. He then had to roll to his side, breaking his jutsu and letting go of Kiba. Well done, Akamaru. Let's go now. In order to confuse their opponent, Akamaru leapt onto Kiba's back and said, Jujin Bunshin. A plume of smoke appeared, and two Kibas with a feral appearance separated from one another and landed on the ground. Kagemain no Jutsu, successful. Kiba looked up in shock, not realizing that the previous shadow had never been completely released, but was still attached to him, merely not limiting his movements. It was all a ruse. Shikamaru was simply waiting for the right moment to extend the shadow from Kiba to Akamaru in order to trap them both. Now that they were both trapped, Shikamaru ran between them, his face oddly leading the way, and the two Kibas were forced to follow suit, but were unable to stop the shortening distance to the opposite wall. With a loud crack, the two Kibas crashed face first into the concrete wall without a reflex, knocking them out cold, and Akamaru returned to his previous form, signifying his unconsciousness. The victor, Shikamaru, who appeared bored as he leaned against the railing next to Naruto, hardly making eye contact, sighed and walked back up into the balcony while the medics dragged the Inuzukas off the floor. "I take it you're still Naruto?" Without expressing his perplexity at his and Hinata's altered appearance, he asked. Naruto smiled back, "Well, you could always call me by my title." The blonde's smile widened even more when the slothful genin turned to face him. "And what's that title?" "The upcoming Hokage." A brief smile briefly appeared on Shikamaru's expressionless face before he returned his focus to the ground below. He muttered, "Yeah, you're still you." "Will the following two combatants step onto the stage?" Hayate yelled, and the two kunoichi soon moved to the floor, with the blonde with the long hair putting on her most menacing expression and the other girl maintaining her typical smile. "So, who do you predict to prevail?" Shikamaru inquired. Naruto caught his attention again by saying, "That all depends on the first attack. If Ino can avoid Tenten's first barrage, she'll have it, but that won't be easy." "Are you familiar with the other?" The girl appeared familiar, but the Nara did not recognize her when she asked. In response, Hinata said, "She's the daughter of the blacksmith, ranged weapons are her forte." "Oh, I see, that will be a challenge for Ino. Are the competitors prepared for Tenten versus Yamanaka Ino? Start." Tenten instantly leapt back, pulled a small scroll out of her pocket, and opened it in front of her. Kunai and shuriken materialized and flew in Ino's direction after applying chakra. She knew that her mind transfer was her only real jutsu, but it was slow and mid-range, so she muttered to herself, "Long range. Crap, this is bad." She took a kunai out of her pouch and began deflecting the kunai that were raining down on her, skillfully dodging the shuriken as she tried to inch closer in the chaos. Tenten abruptly stopped the barrage and knelt on the ground, placing two scrolls vertically in front of her. "This is it," Ino yelled in her head and advanced to get closer. Shikamaru noted, "Looks like Ino made it past the first barrage." With a knowing smile, Hinata said, "That wasn't Tenten's barrage." Naruto glanced over and laughed when he felt a memory that wasn't his own come to him. It seemed that Tenten and Hinata had trained together a few times in the previous weeks when Tenten was outside of Konoha. It seemed that this was the reason why she would always disappear on some days, and Naruto had never asked her where she was going because he believed that everyone needed their privacy. As Ino approached and extended her hands, Tenten jumped with the explosion from the scrolls, and the scroll spiraled upward with Tenten in the center when a huge volley of every weapon imaginable exploded out of it. When Ino looked up, she saw a wall of sharpened blades pelting down at her, and her eyes widened and she felt fear seeping through her body. "I give up." She sobbed and then buried her face in her hands, hoping that time would stop. "Go, you moron." Asuma drew his trench blades and moved to intercept when Kurenai stooped him with a quick glance to her side. A large crack rang out from the balcony. A mangled and broken railing hanging where the young Hyuga woman was once standing. Tenten shouted, drawing back the few weapons she controlled, but there were too many still coming for her to stop. "Kaden." As the words reverberated throughout the room, Tenten exhaled in relief as a sphere of chakra materialized around Ino and all of the blades. When the blades made contact with the sphere, they were deflected downward and lodged in the ground. Looking up, Ino saw Hinata's cream and lavender jacket rustling in front of her, but all she could see when she opened her eyes was blades, kunai and shuriken protruding from the ground, and only a small circle around her was free of weapons. Your opponent wins the instant you become afraid of them and turn your attention away from them. With my own experience and mistakes, I can vouch for the truth of that. Hinata turned around and smiled softly as she extended her hand to Ino. "What actually happened to you, Hinata?" The woman simply kept smiling and nodding at Naruto, and the blonde kunoichi whispered, "There is no way in my mind that this woman was once that shy weirdo." Tenten grinned at her and silently thanked her for defending the Yamanaka, and Hinata helped Ino to her feet before navigating the weapon-strewn area. When you have someone to fight for, that is when you truly become strong. Hayate declared, after deliberation, Tenten was disqualified for putting the life of a fellow shinobi in danger, and Yamanaka Ino had lost. No lives have been lost because of Hyuga Hinata's quick reflexes. Well done, Hinata. Her eyes closed as she felt safe in Naruto's arms as he yelled and seized her in a tight embrace. Neji, who had a faint smile on his serene face and had appeared to have severe indigestion whenever she saw him before the seal was removed, interrupted, Hinata. Sama. You have improved greatly, your father should be proud. She reluctantly withdrew from Naruto's warm embrace and went back to her place by the damaged railing, saying, Thank you, Neji.ni.san. 10-10 finished awkwardly gathering up her collection of weapons, and Hayate resumed his position at the front of the room. Hyuga, Neji and Kankuro, please come down. Gaara said in his typically raspy voice, you better win. He walked to the floor below, where Neji was waiting for him, ready for a fight, and reassured him, hey, don't worry, I've got this. The proctor reminded them to keep it clean, and no killing. I won't kill him, so don't worry. As Kankuro turned to face his opponent, he responded, he'll just wish he was dead. Neji retorted, say that after you've beaten my Byakugan. Veins instantly popped out of his temples as he positioned himself, forcing chakra to his eyes. The fighters are ready. Go. When Kankuro removed his bandage tool from his back and set it on the ground in front of him, Neji struck without even looking at the bandaged object, causing Kankuro's left side to go limp. He quickly untied the tool, exposing himself and the bandage. Wearing one leapt behind the other, causing the life to return to his left side. The Byakugan are said to be able to see through solid objects, but I haven't heard much about them. Previously, nobody was able to distinguish between Karasu and me. You attempted to conceal your true body despite knowing that. What a pitiful effort. I am a puppet user, I need to try anything. Neji grinned, knowing from the ninja's eye movements that Kankuro was getting ready for a defeat because almost everyone has heard of the Hyuga's ability to see chakra, which spells defeat for puppet users. Neji advanced on his adversary and dodged one of Karasu's slashes, tapped the other out of the way, and skidded around the puppet. When Kankuro attempted to retreat, Neji hit a spot on his left wrist. His chakra strings faded from that hand, causing Karasu to lose mobility once more. Neji's lips curled into a sort of smile as he said, you are now within range, Hake Rokuhuyan Sho. 2, 4, 8. Neji began hitting Kankuro with more ferocity, preventing him from molding chakra hit by hit. 64 palms. Kankuro could hardly move as Karasu sagged to the floor. He managed to mouth the words, sorry Gaara, before collapsing to his knees, unconscious. Winner, Hyuga Neji. Neji pulled his sleeves up and made his way back to the balcony as if it were a straightforward workout. As he passed the green ninja, he egged, let's see what you got Lee. Lee's eyes almost caught fire, and he became more motivated for the next battle. I'll return triumphant. With a thumb raised in the air, he yelled. Lee, go for it. Guy yelled at his pupil. Yes, Guy. Sensei. All right, Kitsuke Tama versus Rock Lee. The Jonin turned to face the green clad boy, but there was nobody else there. Kitsuke Tama, please come to the ring. Naruto whispered to his companion, this isn't going to be good. She nodded and held her hand to her lips apprehensively. Tama Kitsuke. Hayate called out again, but the cloaked ninja tapped him on the shoulder. The Jonin was startled by the contact and spun around to meet him. The ninja was dark eyed with a black shadow above them, and had equally dark hair and a pale complexion. The ninja nodded and moved to the other side of the floor, facing Lee, who kicked the air a few times to get his energy up before assuming his fighting stance. Oh, there you are, your fight is about to start. Are fighters prepared? Tama didn't move nor did he take any stance. Hayate looked at him and shrugged. Begin. The AIM ninja's left hand began to move even faster with the increased attacks to block each and every attack, and Lee jumped back and looked up at his sensei. Guy grinned and held up his thumb. Lee took off quickly, launching a powerful roundhouse kick. Thomas simply lifted his arm slowly and let the leg strike pass off his forearm without moving an inch. This display of careless strength fueled Lee's ferocity as he launched a barrage of punches and kicks. Go for it, Lee. No boundaries. With a smile on his face, the taijutsu student bent down to begin adjusting his ankles. Realizing what he was doing, Naruto said aloud, I didn't know Lee wore weights. To demonstrate how heavy the orange weights were, Lee held them out and let them fall with a thunderous bang. As soon as they hit the ground, Lee vanished again, only to reappear when his fist stopped an inch from Tama's nose through the AIM ninja's hand. Lee was astonished that he could keep up and kicked off of the ninja. While adopting a different stance, Lee declared, you are a formidable opponent, I respect your abilities, but I'm afraid I cannot let you beat me. Kakashi saw the clear technique and became enraged at the flagrant disrespect for his student's life. You didn't, Guy. Oh, I did. Kakashi, my enduring adversary. Lee touched me so deeply that I feel compelled to give him a tool to overcome his innate limitations. How many can he open? That's crazy. 5. Hey, what are you two discussing? As he entered the conversation, Naruto asked, and Kakashi's expression returned to normal, and he excused himself from the discussion. Each of the 8 celestial gates has the ability to significantly boost your power. Although there are risks involved, Lee's highly trained body can withstand them. Life's gate is open. The whole room was shocked to see Lee's skin turn red as he gained an enormous amount of strength. Gate of pain, open. When his fist made contact with Tama's crossed arms, preventing his attack, a shock wave blasted outward, and Lee leapt back again to get more distance for his next blow. With the new power raging in his body, he blinked himself to death. The closing gate is open. He ran forward once more and was finally able to get under the aim nin's block and slam his fist into him, sending his body crashing into the wall. Lee followed him and threw a barrage of blows into the shinobi's face and body, making the Jonin consider intervening but decide against it after witnessing the aim nin's strength before. As the dust settled, the shape of Tama emerged as he crawled out from the damaged wall, the hood of his cloak pushed back so that everyone could see his black shadowed eyes. Lee decided that was enough for any body to take and retreated to the opposite side of the floor, but he stayed vigilant. You seem to desire more. Lee made fun of it. Senjutsu? When Guy saw the clear marks the ability had made on the ninja's face, he asked himself a question. Lee started in the direction of the ninja. Wait, Lee, it was too late when Guy yelled. When Guy arrived to block his path, Tama advanced and cocked his fist back to deliver another blow, but he threw the punch anyway, and was shocked to see the Jonin grab it in his hand and stop it effortlessly. Tama waited for the punch to reach where his face should have been, then tilted his head just enough for it to pass by his cheek, then rammed his fist into Lee's stomach. The blast from the powerful punch sent Lee flying into the air, smashing hard into the high ceiling overhead, and his eyes went blank. The victor, Tama Kitsuke. The shinobi flipped his hood back over his head and leapt back onto the balcony with the rest of his team, causing Guy to sigh. Hayate called out, intending to disqualify the aim ninja for using excessive force, but Guy interrupted before he could show his true intention, so he had to let it go. To get the help of the gifted medic, Guy called out, Tsunade. Sama. She got up and approached him to assist in dragging Lee from the room, and after he was out of sight, they placed Lee on an examination table. You called me out here, but why? The Hokage pondered after realizing that the boy had been rendered unconscious and that his life was not in jeopardy. Guy said, I'm sure you saw it too, that aim ninja was using senjutsu. She gasped when she saw his hand, which was obviously broken and deformed from halting the single blow. She was astounded by the damage done to Guy and got to work mending it right away. As the pain in his hand began to lessen, he proposed, I think we should cancel the rest of the preliminaries. That's not something we can do yet. Since knowing senjutsu is not illegal, we should be diplomatic about it. In addition, 2 of our own genin are also senjutsu experts. His eyes were now wide with surprise. Guy closed and opened his hand, adjusting to the sensation after the healing, and was relieved to feel the pain subside. Tsunade grinned and completed her healing. Okay, I'll take your lead on this. To be clear, those 2 are the ones who are knowledgeable about senjutsu, correct? Who else? Just as the maintenance team was finishing up with the debris from the previous fight, Tsunade turned and walked back out into the exam room. The proctor announced, Hyuga Hinata versus Akamichi Choji. Tsunade sat in her chair, and the 2 of them soon found themselves in the center of the floor. As Choji finished eating the last of his bag of potato chips, he turned to face the proctor, who was holding his hands in the air. Start. Choji crumpled his empty bag of chips and tossed it aside, looking fired up. Before we begin, Hinata said, I just wanted to say that I respect your ability to fight with your body as it is. You are a great shinobi. The plump ninja's face cooled slightly after hearing her kind words. I felt that you didn't get enough credit for your abilities when I gained a lot of weight and realized how difficult it was to move. After hearing his words, Hinata grinned and retreated, assuming her fighting stance. Thank you, aside from Shikamaru, Asuma, Sensei, and my family, you are the only one to tell me that. I am thankful, but will still defeat you. Don't expect a win just because I'm a girl. He was a really good guy, and she laughed at his way of saying, I wouldn't think of it, my mom kicks my ass as it is. She concluded that it would be too bad that he would never have the chance to be Chunin this time. Baika no Jutsu. Choji tucked his head into his arms and dramatically grew larger. Nikuden Sensha. After he had rolled into a ball, he began to roll in Hinata's direction, clearly trying to use his size and weight to flatten her. The gentle fist was not the right target for this kind of attack. She whirled in a tight arc just as he was reaching out to touch her. Kaden. The abruptly spinning chakra shell slowed his rotation and sent him flying a little. She halted her rotation just as he was going over his head and swung an empowered palm directly at his midsection. As she used her own chakra to interfere with his ability, his large abdomen almost immediately shrank. He slammed down on the ground, flailing his arms futilely. Holding a kunai to his throat, Hinata leapt to his side. Choji nodded and agreed, saying, matching you against a Hyuga was just a bad draw. As the Akamichi's will to fight was crushed and there was no way out from under the kunai, the proctor declared, winner, Hyuga Hinata. Before rushing to meet Naruto on the balcony, Hinata extended her hand and assisted the young shinobi in standing up. After releasing his mate from another embrace, Naruto said, this next fight is going to be pathetic. Naruto nodded in agreement, saying, probably, I'm just embarrassed to see how Sakura is going to act. The next two fighters, one with a face devoid of emotion and the other with long pink hair, took the floor. Sasuke told her bluntly, you better not just give up right off the bat. Her shoulders sagged, exactly what she intended to happen. She began to smile as she considered her next move. She would undoubtedly lose badly, but the novel concept would make it all worthwhile. Hayate had intended to pause again for suspense, but after reviewing the match, he sighed and called for the start in a bored voice. Haruno Sakura vs Uchiha Sasuke. Begin. Sakura took this opportunity to carefully stare at him. She had done this many times before, but this was the first time he patiently stood and let her. Her lips curled up into a euphoric smile but remained motionless. Sasuke didn't even bother getting into a stance or even taking things seriously. To him, this was just another training match from the academy. One where he didn't even need to try to win. Get out of it. From the balcony, Ino yelled, and her teammates gave her a strange look in response to the odd remark. What? I simply assumed that her forehead was larger than the typical one. Do you understand? 5-headed. 4-headed. Shikamaru simply snorted and slackly returned to watching the fight that was supposed to be happening below. 4 + 1 = 5. When Sakura finally broke the silence, Sasuke said, well, I guess I was wrong. Her face lit up as she returned to reality. Sakura's smile vanished when she heard the words, Naruto wasn't the worst ninja in academy, you are. She was sure she was stuck on him, but she couldn't be worse than the blonde who hadn't even graduated from academy and needed to learn how to be a ninja in a special way. Looking older doesn't make him better either. Sakura growled at the idea, but she knew she couldn't defeat Sasuke, but at least she would try to gain something from the loss. She took a kunai from her pouch and recklessly charged at the Uchiha, who appeared slightly more amused. Sasuke grabbed her wrist without thinking, just as she was within range. Sakura didn't seem surprised, though, and she smiled as she calmly dropped the kunai, wondering if she had some secret trick up her sleeve. In his contemplation, he relaxed his hold just enough to let her pull back her arm a little, putting her hand in his when he finally responded to her movement and tightened his hold. Take that, pig. Indeed. Sakura held up her hand with Sasuke's tightly wrapped around it and yelled at her rival on the balcony. Yes, to hold his hand first. As shocking as the entire fight was, it was even more shocking when her unconscious body never touched the ground. The Uchiha did his best to remain stoic as he tried to show no emotion while holding the pink-haired girl off the ground, but as soon as he realized exactly what he was doing, he let her drop with a dull thunk. She shouted emphatically, and within seconds Sasuke released her with an embarrassed expression before sweeping his hand around in an arc and striking the back of her neck, knocking her out cold. Winner. Uchiha Sasuke. After the match, everyone was quiet, well, except for Naruto, who was giggling at the bizarre scene. After Sakura was hauled off the floor and taken to the infirmary, Hayate gestured for the next competitors. Shut it. Sasuke muttered as he passed him and took his place leaning against the wall behind them. Sabaku no Gaara and Nogi Naguru, you're next. The red-haired ninja, who for once actually believed that it wouldn't be wise to be overconfident in his match, found it quite fascinating that his autonomous sand defense was buzzing with activity even before the match was scheduled to start, followed Gaara down the long staircase. To a nodding Hinata, Naruto remarked, this match will be a tough one. Temari overheard the exchange and positioned herself between the two. Hard? Are you serious? For the past 2 years or so, Gaara has been a shinobi of the sand, and each and every one of his missions has been accomplished successfully. What's more, he hasn't even been scratched on any of them. No genin in the area can match Gaara's level of skill, so he has this one figured out. Before focusing on the match that was about to begin below, Naruto said, "Hey, watch the fight, then you'll know what I'm talking about. The last two ninja from AIM aren't as strong as that Tama guy, but they aren't to be ignored." "Are those ninja familiar to you?" Hayate coughed and hacked loudly for several seconds before calming down and going out to begin the fight. Temari asked aloud, and Hinata only gave a slight nod. It was true that they knew exactly who they were, but they had never really met them before. "Competitors are prepared. Go ahead." The cork of Gaara's gourd popped loudly as it flew out of the container, and the sand nin saw a twitch in his opponent's leg muscles and, in a startlingly quick leap, he was closing in. The ninja from AIM threw an obvious punch, which Gaara didn't even attempt to dodge as it came for him, but he watched with an intensity his siblings had never seen before. Just before the punch was about to hit Gaara's face, a pile of sand seemed to block his attack, preventing the fist from making contact. "You mean the sand demon?" Naguru said. He opened his hand and swiped a handful of the sand, despite the sand's reluctance, until his fist was covered in light blue flames. He turned his hand to the side and let the sand spill onto the ground. Gaara's eyes widened when he realized that he had no control over that sand, that all the chakra that was infused into each and every particle was gone. His face returned to normal, and a swish of sand swept across the lifeless sand, causing it to spring back to life. He watched the AIM ninja closely, paying particular attention to the flamed fists, and focused on preventing the punch that was about to come his way again. The flamed fist approached, but was thwarted by a huge wave of sand that erupted from the gourd to block its path. His opponent's fist made contact with the sand, but it didn't stop as planned, and Gaara was startled to see it land on the opposite side of his sand wall and hit his cheek. Fortunately for him, it didn't have much kinetic energy left in it after passing through so much sand, so it only slightly scuffed his protective sand armor. Gaara watched, perplexed by the progression, and Naguru retrieved his fist, exposing a clear hole in the sand barrier that attempted to block him. He then looked down and saw the sand falling from his cheek where he was contacted. The sand ninja's face darkened and enraged at being touched so easily, rendering his armor useless. Despite his attempts to swat the sand away with his flaming fist, the sand swarmed around Naguru and covered his entire body as massive amounts of it flowed out of him, engulfing his opponent in the heavy particles. Gaara raised his hand. "Sabaku Soso, Desert Funeral." He closed his hand and gave the command to crush the ninja that was firmly inside. He heard and felt a crunch in the sand and let his irate face return to the worn-out, emotionless face he usually wore. As the sand began to form inside his gourd, he whispered to Hayate, "Looks like I'm disqualified." "Watch out, Gaara!" Naruto yelled rapidly. The red-haired boy turned to see what he recognized as Naguru, now without his cloak, his eyes surrounded by the same copper color as his hair, and he reached out with one hand to grab the gourd on Gaara's back before hurling him across the floor and sending him smashing into the opposing wall about 50 feet away. The gourd stayed in the AIM ninja's hand after he threw Gaara, and he looked at it before crushing it between his hand and the room's floor, looking back up with his pale face, palms still resting on the sandy floor, the sand that was now scattered across the floor flying up in a plume of dust as Naguru pushed off the ground and ran towards Gaara at full speed. A pillow of sand appeared just as Gaara's head touched the ground, preventing any serious injury and keeping him barely conscious. The red-haired ninja was just pulling himself from the wall when he noticed that the AIM ninja was closing in quickly. Gaara moved to counter with his sand, only to realize that most of it was now useless. He used what he could to shield himself from the attack, but he felt a hand grip his face through the sand, pulling him off his feet. Naguru held him in the air for a few seconds before twisting to his side and thrusting him to the ground, just like he did the gourd. Gaara was furious and tried to put himself to sleep in order to release Shukaku, but he was stopped from using his technique by feet pressing down on his arms. "Proctor, call it," he ordered. "Does the combatant give in?" Gaara shook his head when Hayate asked him. "Obviously not. I will murder him." Soon after, a fist smashed into the ground, causing the floor up to 4 feet away to crack with a thunderous crack. Naguru was aware of the Shukaku's instability and knew that he had to defeat him while he was still conscious or risk a battle with the demon itself, which would negate the purpose of his presence. "I said call it, or the next one will be to his face." Hayate shook his head. As he struggled to free himself, Gaara cursed the fact that he only had sand techniques and that they had no effect on this ninja, saying, "If you cannot stand after a count of 10 I will deem you unable to battle. 1, 2, 9, 10. Gaara is unable to continue. The winner is Nogi Naguru. Naguru nodded in agreement and grabbed Gaara by his shirt. To make matters worse, he threw him at Naruto in an effort to call out the blonde. Tamari quickly caught her younger brother and brought him to the balcony floor, where he struggled to stand before Naruto and Tamari helped him up. Gaara sighed as he looked at the orange-clad Hanyu. Don't you think they're like you? Finally able to identify the area where he felt a chakra that was similar to the one that so effectively defeated him, he asked. They are, but I don't know what they want. After pushing Naruto's hand away from him and regaining his equilibrium, Gaara turned to face his sister and moaned almost silently, I do. The same thing as I do. To fight you. Her eyes doubled in size at his explicit command, Tamari, when it is your turn, forfeit. She was secretly wondering what it was that he felt in the battle that she couldn't comprehend. Gaara would never give up in a fight, and he appeared so completely defeated that it really began to get to her, making her tremble from the unidentified source of fear. After the first few sweeps of the floor produced little action, Hayate called out, we will have a 30-minute intermission while we clean up all the sand. Gaara walked toward the exit, then paused and raised his hand into the air, causing sand to drop out of his hand and land on the pile on the ground. Then, as the wind swirled around, the sand flew towards Gaara, swirling and compacting tightly until the gourd's form was recreated from the sand and the remaining sand vanished inside it. He turned around and left the tiny makeshift arena after saying, Uzumaki, I expect you to finish these guys in the finals. Hayate proceeded to the next match after realizing the floor was now clear. Uzumaki Naruto vs Shino Aburame. Shino adjusted his sunglasses and straightened his back. I'll pass. Everyone in the room seemed shocked, and Hayate looked to him for an explanation, but he gave none. Shino simply stood there as emotionless as ever. Uzumaki Naruto is the winner by forfeit. What? He yelled in protest. Hell no. I want to fight. Shino repositioned his sunglasses, brightening the blonde's face, but instead of going to the ground, he made his way to the exit, stopping beside Naruto and meeting his eyes. He put his hand on Naruto's shoulder and nodded, demonstrating that his choice was the right one. A few of his insects crawled off the Hanyu's shoulder and joined Shino, indicating that he had insects on him for a while. The fights are done for today, there is no point in fighting a battle, he said, turning to face Tamari to finish, in which you are guaranteed to lose. Tamari vs Nogi Kugeki. With a trembling voice, Tamari began, She had never backtracked from a fight, but there was clearly something bothering Gaara, and if it was something that Gaara wouldn't confront, what could she do? Then she considered what Shino was plainly telling her. You are guaranteed to lose. Hayate shrugged his shoulders and said, I forfeit. She hung her head in defeat and made her way to the exit as well. Since Kankuro wouldn't be ready to leave the infirmary for a little while, she decided to go gather her thoughts and perhaps ask Gaara what exactly was happening. I guess that concludes the preliminary round. The pairings for the finals, which are in a week, will now be selected at random. For the matching, please keep an eye on the board above me. Be well prepared for your mission. 10 names could be written on the aforementioned board, divided into pairs, but only the top 4 pairs were flipping through the names at random. Eventually, the names slowed down, and they all came to a halt on the last sets with an echoing gong. Shikamaru vs Neji Kugeki vs Naruto Naguru vs Sasuke. Tama vs Hinata. After the matches were announced, the genin were permitted to leave the tower and return to the village of Konoha. It was a rather odd turn of events, but to those in the know, it was essentially how it was supposed to go. It was primarily Konoha Ninja against the AIM Ninja trio. Hey Hinata, after we leave, would you like to continue training? As they passed through the corridor that led safely out of the Forest of Death, Naruto said, after witnessing the fight with Gaara, I'm thinking that maybe we should just make sure we've done everything possible. I think that is wise, they kind of make me nervous, she responded. You know what can fix that, don't you? A little bit, don't they? Ramen? When she saw his genuine smile again, she let out a small, contented sigh because, to her, nothing was more stimulating than his genuine smile. She asked with a knowing smile that was accentuated by the hunger in her eyes. The next day, an intruder interrupted their training session at their regular training grounds near the outskirts of Konoha while Kakashi was giving Sasuke some advice. When they both looked up, a man in a ragged robe with red clouds on it was limping in their direction. The two of them could immediately sense the other Uchiha's presence, even though the collar was still high, obscuring the majority of his facial features. Itachi? Sasuke swore and snarled before extending his right hand in preparation to kill the Chidori. Kakashi raised his Hite.8 to reveal his Sharingan and extended his hand to stop him. With that injury, Itachi was not going to pose a threat, as the Jonin believed. Kakashi demanded, Itachi, "What are you doing here?" Without responding, the man simply moved closer until the three of them were looking at one another. He grasped at the wound in his chest and muttered, "They're here, complete destruction." He questioned, "Who is? The Akatsuki?" But all he received was a headshake telling him it wasn't. Itachi dropped to his knees and gazed at his younger brother with his Sharingan active, saying, "No, worse, they destroyed the Akatsuki in less than an hour. Sasuke, train with me. It is your only course of action." Sasuke immediately felt himself sinking into Tsukuyomi, the red backwards world. He glanced at the world, then back down at his brother, who simply vanished into a swarm of ravens and flew behind him before resurfacing in his former Uchiha attire. "Welcome, little brother. This is Tsukuyomi, a realm where I have full control. A world which can only be created with the Mangekyou Sharingan." Wanting to murder the man before him, Sasuke demanded, "What are you doing here?" Standing irate, Sasuke thrust a freshly made Chidori through his brother's heart and declared, "Like I said before, I am here to train you." Itachi fell to the ground in a heap, and he felt a wave of power wash over him as his Sharingan glittered in the red moonlight. Sasuke could see the change in his eyes as he gazed into the river stream. He gained more authority after he finally defeated his brother, who had previously been a close friend. "Good, nice reaction." Sasuke jumped around and turned back to face Itachi, both of them now wielding the Mangekyou Sharingan. "According to Sasuke, I killed you. Kind of yes, but also no, you see I can even control what you perceive as real here. While you truly think that you killed me, I am still alive. So I just have to kill you again." "Not exactly. What do you know about the real massacre of our clan?" Sasuke replied, raising his lightning-covered hand again, "Doesn't matter." With a frown, Sasuke rushed at him and thrust his hand out, saying, "Oh, so you don't care about truth? How about if I promise you greater power?" He advanced even more quickly after being astounded by the level of detail he could see through his Sharingan and by his increased ability to anticipate movements. Sasuke's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets as he skidded to a stop and said, "I see, so you don't want me to teach you about Susanoo? You can teach me Susanoo? You're in my realm, aren't you? I can provide you with weeks of training within only a few seconds. The only problem is that I wonder if your body can handle it, since this technique doesn't strengthen that as well. Like I care, teach me. Well, if you kill yourself, don't blame me." As Kakashi was shouting and hitting Sasuke, the young Uchiha's dark eyes opened. His eyes instantly became red, and a star that resembled a kaleidoscope appeared in them. Itachi coughed up blood after the silver-haired Jonin jumped back in shock. Cradling his brother's head, Sasuke ran to his side. He coughed again before collapsing in Sasuke's embrace. "Remember all I taught you, little brother? This took the last bit of chakra I had." As a few drops of liquid landed on his brother's lifeless cheeks from the young Genin's face, Kakashi watched in awe. Sasuke got to his feet and turned to Kakashi, his eyes watering. "Don't worry, I won't forget." "What happened to you?" he inquired, his soul filled with feelings other than hatred. "I was shown the truth, and Susanoo." Kakashi's face was filled with shock at what Sasuke had disclosed, but he was also taken aback by the boy's faint smile. Knowing how it happened that so much information could have been ingrained in him in such a short period of time, Kakashi asked, "So, care to try it out outside of Tsukuyomi?" "I suppose it couldn't hurt," Sasuke said, glaring at his brother until the corpse was consumed by black flames. "Well, let's see what you've got, Kakashi-sensei." Over the past week before the Chunin exam finals, the two Hanyu trained more than ever before their upcoming fights. Their efforts were able to keep up because the three aim were far stronger than they had first believed. As they traded blows with their full Kitsune abilities, sweat trickling from their brows, they did not retreat an inch. They had been terrified of hurting each other at first, but as their mate bonds grew stronger, it became increasingly more difficult for them to strike out. Since all strategy and ideas were communicated through their link, the only time one would truly connect with an attack was when it occurred spontaneously and without any planning. They had developed a sense of their heightened senses during their wilderness training prior to the Chunin exams, but they were still unpredictable and could only use Kitsune magic to achieve this. The two exchanged a series of brief blows before pausing when they felt an odd object coming their way. They looked in the direction of the intrusion but saw nothing. Before returning to his position, Naruto said, "You're getting better." "That's my line, kiddo," exclaimed Jiraiya, their reticent sensei. "I see you two are still progressing at an unnatural rate." Hinata questioned, "What brings you out here, Ero? Sennin?" before assuming her position to resume their spar. The couple paused and looked around, their faces blank, before saying, "Tsunade would like a word with the two of you before tomorrow's matches start. And by the looks of things here, you should probably call it a day. They sparred that day, punishing their tiny training ground into submission. No tree remained without missing limbs and leaves, and not a blade of grass remained on the ground. When Naruto finally gave in, he said, yeah, we could take a break. They moved toward Jiraiya after allowing their shapes to return to normal. The elderly man pondered aloud, so senjutsu, I would have never thought that it was demon chakra, I was always told it was from nature. Naruto reminded him, kind of as since demons are part of nature. True, I never really could get a straight answer out of the toads anyways, so it doesn't really surprise me. Besides, only a demon could look like Bunta. When the three entered Tsunade's office, she was greeted with a smile, but it vanished when she saw Jiraiya. As usual, Shizune was waiting for the blonde to finish while standing by her side with a stack of papers. She objected to the intrusion in silence, but she was swiftly dismissed in favor of the break. To be sure, Tsunade inquired, I am right to assume that you already know that the AIM Nin are not actually from AIM? They agreed with her assumption and nodded. Great, well Jiraiya has come up with some information regarding them. It would seem as though they have managed to defeat the whole of Akatsuki and disguised themselves as genin to gain entry into Konoha. As of yet we are unsure why they would destroy Akatsuki and the village of AIM and only sneak into Konoha. We don't even know who they are or why they possess senjutsu. Without hesitation, Naruto replied, they are demons. Wait, what? Tsunade exclaimed, bewildered. We figured you had already figured it out, so I didn't say anything, but they have demon blood, Kitsune to be more exact. What are they after? Not sure Chan, but I can assure you that we will find out in the finals. It would seem that they have a problem with Hinata and I, but that's all I can figure. Then you two should be careful. That's the idea. Also I don't think what was shown with Gaara was the extent of their power. That Tamagai seems like he was holding back the most. He stopped that punch, and he was holding back? I can't even begin to describe the damage he did to Guy's hand. After he confirmed, Tsunade reclined in her chair. You understand that if what you say is accurate, we won't be seeing a Chunin fight, but rather one at the cage level? Naruto said, you're right, let us worry about the fight and you guys worry about protecting everyone in attendance. He was aware that he would be holding back in a full-on battle to prevent harm to the villagers. I guess that is a viable take. I know you two are powerful, I just don't know. As he turned toward the door, he teased, hey, leave it to the young ones, we don't need you geezers throwing out your back or something. Tsunade's brow furrowed in rage, and she threw a large book at him, embedding the spine into the wall just over his head. Give that book a read. She yelled back, you might pick up some helpful knowledge. With the book in her hand, Hinata swiftly caught up to her mate, who was still laughing as he walked down the hall, after removing the book from the wall and apologizing to the Hokage. The book, Naruto.kun. She giggled as she pushed the book into his hands, and he stopped to stare at her pretty face. Come on, at least look at it after we get back home. There was at least some reasoning for her to give it to you. Okay fine, I'll look at it. A pledge? Craftily, she asked. They slipped through the main gate and through the alleys around the other buildings until they reached their little home and sneaked inside. They didn't need to sneak in because it was their home. They just felt that there was too much fuss made about them every time they arrived, and it bothered them. Yeah, promise. He threw the book into his back pocket without expecting anything from it and carried on through the village, Hinata humming happily while holding to his arm. With a sigh, Naruto collapsed into the chair he had assigned to himself. The training of the day was finally catching up with him, and he was certain Hinata was feeling the same way. The book he had shoved into his pocket was difficult to read, so he took it out and decided to give it the scrutiny he had promised. As soon as he opened the pages, he became absorbed in the information. Are you going to bed, Naruto.kun? A tiny voice called out, and Naruto looked up, not realizing how much time had gone by but feeling compelled to read on. As she lay on the bed, hoping to participate in a certain evening activity, Hinata looked disappointed and rolled over in bed, silently asking herself why she had made him promise to read the book. Not right now, I'm reading this, she said. After a while, movement in the bed roused the sleeping Hyuga, and she opened her eyes just enough to confirm that her mate was joining her and cuddling up to her warm body. Was the book enjoyable? She asked blearily. Yeah, it will help, I think. She muttered, that's good, before falling asleep again. The day of the final Chunin exam has arrived. Naruto and Hinata woke up late to the clamor of Konoha's crowds making their way to the stadium. Realizing they were running late, they both quickly got ready and fled the Hyuga Manor's gate. Although there were still people lining the streets, suggesting they weren't as late as they first believed, the manor was undoubtedly deserted, indicating that the clan was already present. They both exhaled when they realized they arrived on time and settled into a chair beside Shikamaru, avoiding the throng of people lining up at the arena's main entrance in favor of the competitor's special entrance around the back. He said, "Took your time. When did you arrive here, too?" Knowing that he was typically the last to arrive, Naruto inquired. "About an hour ago. I couldn't sleep very well." The lazy genin turned to the blonde and shrugged his shoulders after a few seconds, saying, That is surprising." He said, "I think so too." Naruto reminded them, "Well, just be glad you have a normal opponent." "And how normal is a Hyuga prodigy? I think I may be in over my head." "Maybe, but I'm sure that brain of yours has thought up at least one idea or two." Shikamaru snorted and turned back to look at the arena floor. This is when Naruto realized why he had spent an hour there. The arena floor had different terrain in a few places, including a grassy area in the middle with a few large trees for cover, a sandy area to the north, and a rocky area to the south. He had come there to come up with a plan that would take advantage of the field terrain, because, as his father had always taught him, a great plan will always prevail over a greater ability. As attention was drawn to the cage seats, the crowd's roar abruptly subsided, and Tsunade stood beside the Sandane, holding the ceremonial hat, gazing out over the crowd of people awaiting the Chunin exam final. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everyone for attending to witness the accomplishments of our generation and perhaps even the birth of a future leader. 8 of the best genin from each of the 5 nations are gathered here today, competing for the title of Chunin. The proctor for this event doesn't need to be introduced. We hope you all enjoy the matches we have prepared." Then, all of a sudden, a form exploded from the arena floor, leaving a huge hole in his wake. "Because I, the great Jiraiya, am the only man or woman who is not familiar with the wisdom of Mount Myoboku. The great Sannin of Konoha arrived," he announced loudly, eliciting a huge wave of cheers. Naruto moaned at the sound of the man's voice, but he was curious as to why Shikamaru had suddenly smiled. He followed the calculating gaze and saw a pile of dirt on the far side of the arena, not more than 20 yards from where the Sannin emerged. Unable to decipher the meaning, he had to give it up because it was unlikely to come to him later. "All right." He looked out to blank faces until a Chunin ran out and gave the man a card with names on it. "Let's get this thing rolling. Get that Hyuga and the deer guy out here," Jiraiya yelled. The Hanyu couple was sitting in the contestants' box discussing who they believed would win as the two made their way to the center of the arena. "Oh, that's better. The first match, Hyuga Neji versus Nara Shikamaru. I don't know Hinata, this could be a close one. It all depends on if Shikamaru can stay away from Neji long enough to hatch a plan." Their friendly debate was abruptly cut short by Sasuke, who appeared to be wearing a much calmer expression. "That's what I'm saying. He already has the plan. You should have seen the look on his face when Ero Sennin broke out of the ground. I think that'll have something to do with it." "You are both right, it can go both ways, but I'd put my money on Shikamaru." "Really? What makes you say that now?" Naturally, Naruto was in agreement and was only interested in Sasuke's perspective. With a cheeky grin, Naruto said, "He's too calculating." "Are you implying that his intelligence surpasses yours?" When the Uchiha's attitude remained unchanged, the blonde's smile began to wane. Normally, a comment like that would annoy him, but this time, he appeared unconcerned. The blonde was shocked when he said, "That's exactly what I'm saying." "Now that I've heard it all, are you certain that it's you inside?" As he prodded Sasuke's face, he asked, and the boy with the raven hair swiftly grabbed the protruding finger and chose to swat it away. "Want to put me to the test?" At the very Sasuke-like reaction, the blonde burst out laughing. "Nah, it's you all right. Are you prepared, Nara Shikamaru? Are you prepared, Hyuga Neji?" Jiraiya took a moment to get their approval. Then, start. The contestants were left to fight after the Sannin vanished into a cloud of smoke. When the match began, Shikamaru ran at full speed in the direction of the eastern side of the rocky area to the south, away from the trees and the hole in the ground. The young Nara's reasoning for this move was only in his head, leaving everyone, especially Neji, to speculate as to what he would do next. The Hyuga immediately started to follow him, and since he had some knowledge of how the Nara operated, he knew that he had to stop Shikamaru before he could get into the position he desired. After the first few steps, Neji knew he could easily catch up with the Nara's slower movements, and he overtook him and skidded around him, easily blocking his path. He stood firmly in his gentle fist stance, his eyes activated. Naturally, Neji saw them easily and deflected the first one, only to discover that there was another one right behind it. Shikamaru looked surprised and threw 4 kunai at him in desperation. missing a technique he should have anticipated from all the 10-10 sessions. Kaden. Neji cursed to himself, stopped the rotation, and began pursuing the Nara. As before, he caught up to him, but this time he didn't block his path. Instead, he threw a series of shuriken to stop his movement. The entire group of kunai were dispersed in various directions, all stuck into the ground around him. Shikamaru took advantage of the small opening and fled toward the sandy northern side with the intention of escaping. After the last weapon was deflected, Neji immediately stopped the rotation to catch Shikamaru before he made a run for it, and as he had anticipated, Shikamaru was running straight at him. Shikamaru grunted and threw another large set of kunai, now mixed with a group of shuriken just for fun. Neji knew he was up to something, but he was unable to figure it out on the spot. Now that I can reach you. The Nara ducked, revealing a mass of shuriken now engulfing him. Shuriken Kage Bushin no Jutsu. Neji was forced to halt his assault in order to transition to defense. While Neji defended, Shikamaru seized the chance and ran towards the arena's western wall. He increased his running effort because he could feel Neji was now pursuing him. Unfortunately, he tripped over a rock that was in his way and fell to the ground. Holding his hands together, he rolled across the floor and came to a halt, prone on his knee. In a desperate attempt to trap the Hyuga, a shadow shot out from the Nara, but it was easily seen through, and Neji leapt away from him, stopping only a few inches from his shadow's reach. Shikamaru could see Neji standing 3 feet east of the hole Jiraiya exploded from where he was crouching. Panting from running, he stood and glanced at his opponent on the other side of the field. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The audience was momentarily blinded by the sudden burst of bright light from the 2 locations where the kunai were dispersed, but when they were able to see again, Shikamaru was standing right in front of Neji and blew some weird powder into the Hyuga's face with his hand. Neji asked, feeling a powerful, groggy force envelop him, "What was that?" Shikamaru sighed as Neji dropped to his knees, closed his eyes, and made a faint snoring noise. "Sleeping powder made from the antlers of the deer on my clan's farm. I'm sorry, but you've lost." While the crowd cheered, Jiraiya declared, winner, Nara Shikamaru. Even though she had not been present when the match changed. "I guess you were right, Naruto-kun. He made it seem like he desperately needed to get to one area, when in fact he really wanted to get to a different area, but in doing so he planted flash tags." The sudden increase in light at that time actually made Neji's shadow stretch and fall into the hole arrow. Sennin came out of and Shikamaru's shadow did the same into the hole of the entrance. He then connected the shadows beneath the ground and used his control to move Neji close enough to get him with the sleeping powder before the light faded and broke the jutsu. It happened so fast I could barely follow it. After seeing it all. "Yeah, that's Shikamaru. When we were younger, Choji, Kiba and I never once won a game against him when it was his turn. No matter the game, he'd win in only a few seconds. If it wasn't for his laziness costing him other rounds, he wouldn't have been fun to play with." Hinata admitted, "I didn't know you played with him that much in earlier years. It's not as if she could have kept up with him constantly prior to their academy days." Hinata turned abruptly and saw the Uchiha turn away. "We did, almost every Sunday, right Sasuke?" she asked. He muttered, "Only guy the first lost hide and seek to." It had been a long time since Sasuke had even acknowledged that he used to play with the entire group of younger boys, so Naruto burst out laughing at the comment. He said jokingly, "You've changed, Sasuke." Naruto was pleased to see the man who had once been a friend return to his pre-massacre way of thinking, saying, "You're more back to normal now." Shikamaru said, "You're up," as he sank into the chair beside Sasuke and sighed. With great energy, Naruto got to his feet and pumped his fist. Now the real excitement begins. Hinata gave him a quick good luck kiss and sent him off, saying, "Go get him, Naruto-kun." The crowd was filled with whispers about the whereabouts of the Kyuubi kid and how he simply vanished before showing up for the Chunin exams. Next on the fight schedule is Uzumaki Naruto vs Nogi Kogeki from AIM. Jiraiya modified his intended announcement after snorting at the idiots. When the competitor entered the arena, more subdued chatter started, but it was quickly overtaken by the cheers of the Hyuga section as they erupted. Jiraiya yelled, "That's right folks," to energize the assembly. The speech was filled with gasps and applause as people came to their own conclusions about the young man. The man entrusted with holding the Kyuubi prisoner by none other than his father, Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage. Loved until her dying breath by his mother, Uzumaki Kushina. The legacy of the Yellow Flash and the Red Hot Habanero. "Here's Konoha's #1 unpredictable ninja Uzumaki Naruto," she said. Even the Hyuga section, which was still the loudest, soon fell silent to allow the game to start. Now then, let's get it going. Ready? Begin. When Kogeki removed his cloak, the final remaining ninja were exposed. Mid-length and dark red, his hair had patches of black streaks strewn throughout. His face had a pale complexion like the other three, but what was more intriguing was how similar their facial features were. Like the other two, his clothes essentially matched the color of his hair. Additionally, his eyelids displayed senjutsu signs, indicating that he was prepared for battle. Kogeki muttered, "You make me sick," and lunged forward to land a lightning-fast kick. Naruto felt the crushing blow hit him before he could even raise his arms to block. Before he hit the ground with his palm and straightened his body, he skidded half the way across the arena before landing on his feet and skidding to a stop. Naruto gazed downward until his body began to fill with the demonic chakra. In a flash, Kogeki was upon him, punching the blonde's face with lightning speed. When the fist landed in Naruto's palm, the AIM ninja's expression changed from emotionless to one of surprise. The blonde asked, "How many?" which caused the enemy to stare at him, wondering what he was requesting. To be clear, he repeated, "How many tails? I don't have to tell you anything." Kogeki landed on his hands and knees after jumping back. He looked genuinely feral as his teeth lengthened with his claws. Behind him, Naruto could now make out the dim outline of his ears and 3 swishing tails. Naruto sprang forward, grabbed the kitsune's face, flipped him onto his back, and slammed his head to the ground, saying, "Just 3? Who do you think I am? Kuda, you insolent Nagatsune whelp. Who are the others? It's Tamamo again, isn't it?" Kurama yelled. The sound of a voice he recognized from his past caused the fallen kitsune to whimper. At that moment, he remembered his first battle after being named the Three Tails, in which he fought alongside other kitsune to defeat a very young kitsune aberration with 9 tails. They said that this youngling could only be a mutation because there had never been a 9-tailed kitsune. Kogeki snarled because he didn't want to experience the total defeat that the young Kurama had inflicted on him. Using all of his might, he reverted to a quasi-human form and pushed Naruto violently away from his body. He growled louder and rolled to his 4 paws. Under Naruto's feet, one of his more pronounced tails plunged deeply into the ground and leapt outward. Even though the big tail only lightly touched his leg, it was enough to make him stop feeling it. What the hell? Kuda uses Raiden attacks with his tails, they have a paralyzing effect. I see, maybe we should eliminate that ability. Naruto pulled a big red sword out of its sheath. The guard was covered in a tuft of equally red fur, and the blade had a blood-red appearance with no sheen. The kitsune roared once more and lunged forward. It stumbled and fell after Naruto kicked its front paw while dodging to the left. The blade swung forward as Naruto yelled, "I've got you now," and crashed into the ground behind the kitsune, narrowly missing its body. Although the audience didn't see exactly what those of kitsune blood saw, the ground cracked and crumbled beneath the blade. What was thought to have been a miss was actually spot on. When the kitsune felt a tail being cut off from its body, it let out a painful howl. Holding the blade to his throat in interrogation, Naruto demanded, "How many more came with you?" He gave a painful yelp, "Tamamo Sama will kill me. Tell me." The fox began to convulse all of a sudden. Naruto yelled, "Ba-chan," toward the bleachers. Even though the Hokage's eyebrow fluttered, she still took off. As soon as she touched down beside the kitsune, she began studying it. The fox soon ceased its movement, and she stood up and shook her head. Medics rushed out, threw a sheet over the body, and began to move it off the field. The opponent, Nogi Kogeki, has died from heart failure unrelated to this match. The winner is Uzumaki Naruto. Tsunade implored Naruto to warn the others to exercise caution. Naruto sheathed the sword and made his way back to the competitor's waiting area, saying, "Don't worry, Ba-chan. The one we really need to worry about is the once up against Hinata. This one was small time in comparison. Get ready for a mess when she fights." Ordinarily, he would be delighted to return triumphant, but something about the kitsune's death annoyed him. He walked past Tama and up the stairs to the waiting room. The ninja's arm reached out and stopped him in his tracks. "We will eliminate all kitsune Hanyu." With a growl, the kitsune pushed Naruto against the wall and said, "You can try Tamamo, but we will stop you." "Who do you think you are, Hanyu?" Naruto tightened his hold on Tamamo's wrist with an orange-flamed hand, then pulled it away from his chest. He let him go because he was happy with the performance. After straightening his jacket, Naruto returned to his chair and said, "You can call me Kitsune no Uruji, or Lord of Foxes, your choice." "Your turn, Sasuke. Don't get beat up too bad." The shrill screams of all the women present reverberated throughout the arena as he came into view. HMPH, I'll show you how to truly show off for the crowd. They all chanted, Sasuke, Sasuke, Sasuke. Jiraiya yelled, well, I guess they all know who is next, Uchiha Sasuke versus Nogi Naguru. The female cheer squad didn't even slightly slow down as he waited for the two to stop in the middle of the arena. Fighters ready, begin. The copper-haired Kitsune had already focused a flame around his fists and used his demonic abilities. In order to gain some space and activate his Sharingan, Sasuke stepped back. Without hesitation, Sasuke threw out his hand and sprinted in the direction of the Kitsune ninja. Chidori. Naguru let go of his left shoulder and twisted in the same direction, completely missing him with the lightning infused hand. Continuing the spin, the Kitsune grabbed Sasuke's wrist with his right hand, turning him so that his back was to the Uchiha and his left elbow was aimed directly at his face. Before lightning burst from the fox's body, Sasuke whispered in its ear, Chidori Nagashi. This gave Naguru an electrifying experience. Astonished by the surprise, the Kitsune coughed and collapsed to the ground. He flipped back to his feet as soon as he regained consciousness. He turned to see the Uchiha leap backwards while raising his hand to his face. Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu. A huge dragon head bearing down on the fox materialized from a huge ball of flame. The Kitsune leaned forward, growling, and was swallowed up by the dazzlingly bright flames. As Sasuke hit the ground and began to make his way back to the waiting area, a contented smile appeared on his face. The stadium's walls cracked and the ground shook as a loud, reverberating growl broke out. Steam was rising from the center of Sasuke's attack when he turned around. Out of the flaming fire, a huge paw and an equally large head appeared, both dripping with water. The remainder of the fire was extinguished when two large tails struck the ground. Sasuke pulled the katana at his waist and pressed lightning chakra into the blade, saying, hey, looks like the battle continues. With the water all over the Kitsune and the Chidori's distinctive crackling and chirping, the blade was further sharpened, making this a surefire blow. Tamamo threw off his cloak and said to himself, I guess it starts now. When Naruto noticed the movement toward Tamamo, he abruptly got up and turned to face his mate. Hinata, she said, right, and moved to stand beside him just as Tamamo vanished. A similar lightning strike struck the sword just as the crackling blade from Sasuke's Kusanagi was about to strike Naguru's body. Before the scene cleared and Tamamo was seen holding the sword's blade in his hand, sparks were flying in all directions. The Hanyu abominations will be cleansed, all hail the Kitsune no Yukai. A sizable crowd in the stands chanted, hail Tamamo. Sama the Kitsune no Uruji. A strong kick left Kusanagi in the Kitsune's hands and sent Sasuke flying across the ground. Grinning, he glanced at the sword and swung it a couple of times. At the sudden commotion, Tsunade stood up quickly. She commanded, defense teams, move now. With a sword swing, Tamamo yelled, Nagatsune. Attack. Primarily addressing the Hyuga group gathered in the stands. The Kitsune felt a strong fist strike his cheek while he was yelling his battle cry, sending him flying across the field. Naruto drew back his fist and said, I see, you want to be the Lord of Foxes. You want to be the Lord of Foxes? You'll have to go through me first? The blonde said, ignoring the fact that he was facing away from the large, two-tailed Kitsune in its full-sized form. The Kitsune anticipated contact with a huge paw swipe, but was taken aback to see irate Lavender. Hued eyes that were fully equipped with Kitsune magic staring at him. She leapt up and nailed him exactly under the chin, lifting the enormous fox off his feet in the process, her fist glowing with the Kyuubi's face. After landing, the fox lay still on the ground. Taking advantage of the pause in combat, Naruto rushed to Sasuke's side, where he was slowly getting up off the ground. His sword was gone when he reached for it. Even Naruto could see the fear in his eyes as he looked around for the blade. Kusanagi. Where is it? Tamamo has it. He mouthed, no, Kusanagi is the highest level of the lost treasures, not even shapeshifter. The last Muramasa has the ability to defend against it once chakra is applied to the blade, and that fox has stronger lightning chakra than anyone. Got it, Sasuke. A black fox with red stripes landed on the arena floor, waving its four tails, as a distant thunderous roar rumbled through the stadium. With a cloud of breath escaping its mouth, he turned to the side and roared even louder. Naguru rose again shortly after the two-tailed fox, and a second red streak went by, exposing Kuda, the three-tailed fox, standing beside him. Naruto left after Tamamo without even waiting for Sasuke to accept his suggestion. You go help Hinata with those three and I'll figure out something to get that sword away from him. He ran quickly, pulled out the long red blade, and slashed at the kitsune's slowly moving body. To halt the heavy blade's sweep, Tamamo turned and raised the sword. Kusanagi sliced through the blade, splitting it in two with a swift motion. "Wah!" murmured Naruto, who never trusted Sasuke's words, but there was evidence of his assertion on the ground. After grabbing his broken blade, Naruto swiftly wielded a shimmering blue katana, the form in which Hinata first discovered shapeshifters. "Pick up the pieces and let's try another form." He turned just in time to stop Tamamo and Kusanagi's attack. He heard the blue blade creak in protest and could feel the pressure being applied to it. Fortunately, Naruto was able to fend off the attack and the blade held together. Seeing the tiny crack in the blade now, he leapt to his feet and took a step back. "Kurama!" On it. The blade quickly repaired itself, but they were both aware that this was only a temporary solution and that it would inevitably occur again. While barely avoiding another attack, Naruto began to reflect on the book Tsunade had given him, knowing that blade was not good enough to use in prolonged combat. Although it contained words and illustrations, this book was not your typical one because it discussed folklore and legends, primarily those pertaining to magic and swords. After reading the first few pages, he discovered that many blades were given legendary status and that each one was named, as if it were their own incantation for wielding the blades. Although Naruto was never good at remembering names, he did remember a few that he had read about. Shapeshifter, the final Muramasa, Kusanagi, the grasscutter, and even Graham, the dragon slayer, the fabled great sword from a distant land. Remembering this, he concluded that it couldn't hurt to try, just like they used to. The sword was raised high in the air by Naruto. "Kusanagi." He yelled the sword's name, and the blue blade instantly changed shape to resemble the sword Tamamo was holding. The two blades clashed as the kitsune fell on him again. Before a chip broke out of the Kusanagi in Naruto's hand, you could hear the blades creaking in protest and neither moving an inch. With a mental curse, he pushed off Tamamo's blade to make space once more and tried changing the blade. Fights were erupting around the mass of Hyuga in the stadium stands. Many small fox demons were lunging at the members, but fortunately, they were only weak, single-tailed demons. Hanabi's young voice exclaimed, "Oto! Sama!" as she tried to fend off two of the young kitsune at once. It was Hake Kusho, vacuum palm. One of the kitsune was thrown far from their group into the air. Heishi assisted in destroying the pack after landing beside his young daughter. "Stay sharp, Hanabi. Their instincts are greater than ours, but our technique is better." She tried to double her efforts and said, "Okay." Though it was still 3-on-2 and they were battling the 2, 3, and 4-tailed kitsune yokai, Sasuke had finally joined in on Hinata's battle. The strange thing about it was that they had the other two disabled prior to the 4 tails showing up. When Hinata called out, "Sasuke-san, I need you to buy me some time. We feel it is time to end this battle which is on their terms. We, Naruto-kun and I, don't ask how right now, but he's just grasped something that will turn the tide." "Fine. But my next jutsu won't last long. My chakra reserves aren't quite high enough." Sasuke nodded and leapt to the front of the trio, now focusing on him. "Understood. I just need to channel my chakra correctly and I can't do that while fighting." Almost like a medic ninja, the 4-tailed beast moved farther behind the 2 as it backed up. Sasuke observed that the fox did not use any abilities, suggesting that it was a pure augmented melee type. The other was clearly a water type, and the 2-tailed demon reared back before charging forward at full speed. Just as he was blocking the first blow, he saw a massive ball of water flying in his direction. He needed to help his temporary teammates as much as possible because he knew he wouldn't last long at this pace. Hinata was focusing behind him, so he had to defend against the water bullet even though he wanted to avoid it. A bluish-purple hand appeared out of the ground as if it were a specter seeking revenge just as the water bullet was about to hit him. The hand quickly encased Sasuke inside the strange deity's skeletal ribcage after swatting down the attack and beginning to pull the remainder of itself from the ground. As Hinata gazed up at the peculiar jutsu, she couldn't help but wonder why the Uchiha possessed such a powerful talent. They would all still be around if they weren't so self-centered. It was only a few seconds after it was called forth that it began to wane, but Sasuke was easily keeping the 2 demons at bay. She stood and slowly executed a series of hand seals, aware that her time was up. Kachiyose no Jutsu. A powerful wind ripped through the arena, uprooting the trees and nearly forming a tornado in the sands. The 2 large kitsune's snouts were pushed to the ground by a huge white fox just as Susanoo faded. When the white fox roared and spread its 7 tails in its direction, The four tails took a step forward and were met by a fierce wind. The four tails were asked, "Myobu, what are you trying to achieve?" The four-tailed kitsune appeared to shrink in response to her nod toward the darkening clouds coming in from the north. "Huli, you shall have your answer in a moment," she said. With a clap of thunder, two foxes that were the same size as the larger Myobu appeared out of nowhere. Calmly, the two spread their tails and awaited an explanation. "Tengoku, Gakkai, I ask for your permission to invoke the right of succession." Tengoku, the six-tailed gray fox, asked, "Succession?" The tan fox twitched one of his five tails and said, "May we ask the identity of the successor?" Even people who couldn't understand Kitsune's speech could tell the two were taken aback by the Kyuubi Hanyu. Gakkai said, "A Hanyu, let us?" Her paws lifted off of the two smaller kitsune, but they stayed prone on the ground. "I know it is a stretch, but we can't ignore the strength of the Kyuubi, nor can we just allow Tamamo to operate on his own. The Hanyu are part of us and aren't what we thought." Hinata moved gently near the two kitsune with a big white paw. "This is the Kyuubi Hanyu's mate, a Hyuga with a large caring heart. We once talked about the possibility of cohabitating with them if they would show an ounce of humility. This one has well over an ounce and was the one to call all three of us here." The tan kitsune growled, "You, woman, with a bow," she replied courteously, "Yes, Gakkai, Sama." "Your mate, what is he thinking?" She had a brief pause before grinning. "He'd like for us all to step back so he can fight Tamamo properly and allow the Hokage to protect the audience with a barrier so he can start to cut loose." Tengoku said, You have the full kitsune bond," while nodding and wearing a thoughtful expression on his furry face. Additionally, the tan fox nodded. "So be it, Gakkai." She nodded and turned to face the stands, saying, "Myobu, you have the approval of 18 tails, a majority vote among us." All of the smaller kitsune were frozen in place as the three large foxes snarled at once in a high-pitched growl. Due to the battles they were taking part in, the smaller one-tailed yokai whimpered and retreated. Before assuming her humanoid form, the great white fox began to shrink in size. All of the kitsune in the arena shrank to their human forms and gathered in a long line in the stadium's front row. The kitsune rite of succession has been initiated. Citizens of Konoha and those of the Kitsune Yokai clan are to bear witness to the rise of the Lord of Foxes. A fight shall take place in this arena for the fate of the Hyuga and all Kitsune Hanyu. The Kyuubi Hanyu shall battle with Tamamo, the eight-tailed kitsune. All others stand by. A wall surrounding the arena floor erupted in a translucent blue flame as soon as the three highest-level kitsune joined them. This foxfire will protect the citizens from harm. The fight of succession begins, now. Thanks to Hinata's timely completion of her part of the plan, Naruto had finally been able to take a break from all the fighting. He would have run out of inventive swords to try on the seemingly invincible Kusanagi if it had gone on any longer. Even though the sword's strength was increased by using its names, it still lacked the power of a genuine blade like Kusanagi. During the brief break while the kitsune were erecting the barrier and attempting to figure out how to defeat the sword, Naruto gasped. Recalling what Shapeshifter had told him when he first discovered the blade buried in the tree, he muttered, "Undefeatable blade, right?" From inside the sword, Muramasa pleaded with the Kyuubi, "Mr. Fox, let me help. I don't have time for you right now. I don't know how much longer I can keep up making these blades. Each time one gets cut, I lose a bit of my strength. I know, you aren't using it correctly. You need to bend reality to make a truly legendary forging appear. This can be done only through an incantation for the blade." "Fine, then tell me what this incantation is. Only if you make this cage bigger." "Fine. And get me a bear plushie? I can't sleep in here." The Kitsune clan had just formally ordered the start of the battle between Tamamo and Naruto. Instead of using only swords, Naruto chose to try a different kind of bladed weapon and brandished a big axe that resembled a halberd. The powerful weapon was effortlessly sliced in two as he thrust it down. As he kicked the weapon's broken half back to the blonde Hanyu, Tamamo vowed, "If that is all you have, I will take your head." Naruto considered his next blade carefully, but the Kyuubi remained silent. "Kurama, you there?" was asked, but there was no response. Naruto was about to launch a second attack after the Kusanagi blade narrowly missed slicing through his throat when the Kyuubi's ominous voice echoed in his ears. "Old man Muramasa has a way to bring a true legendary sword into existence, not just these imitations, but there is one problem. Once we use it, it will only last for a minute and I will have to rest for an entire day after that minute. It is an all or nothing approach." "Just how I like it. What do we do?" I complete an incantation, and you call out the name of the sword you most desire. It has to be a sword that is unbeatable, so think about it wisely, then I will see you tomorrow. Naruto stumbled backwards under the subsequent downward strike, saying, "Okay, go ahead and do it. I have made innumerable blades. My bones are now swords, steel is my body, and fire is my heart. I, the final Muramasa, will forge the legendary sword by its name because I am unmatched in life and unaware of death." Naruto was uncertain whether he had correctly pronounced the odd name based on his book memory when a brilliant light as bright as the sun glowed from the sword like a ray of sunlight. "Khaled Volk!" he exclaimed. It appeared as though the dark clouds in the sky parted, allowing the sun's radiance to fall on his blonde hair. The guard and hilt turned to gold, and the blade grew heavier. Unlike any other sword they had made, the exquisite, gleaming blade featured detailed engravings and scalloped patterns imprinted along the steel's length. "Khaled Volk?" the curious Kitsune asked, pausing his attack to inquire about the unfamiliar name. "What's that?" Naruto raised the blade and swung it gently, observing the melodic sound it produced as it sliced through the air. "The true name of the sword that will break Kusanagi. I read about it in an old book. This blade was genuinely superior to the other likenesses." Tamamo prepared his sword and slammed it into the great double-edged sword, saying, "Utter nonsense, I've never heard of it and I've lived for 1,000 years, prepare to die." Kusanagi was the only blade creaking this time. Naruto pushed the katana back with a strong shove, then slashed down with a slash that clanked against the smaller katana. The great sword's weight caused the smaller katana to bend to its side, and then, in front of everyone's eyes, the Kusanagi broke like glass. Tamamo's expression of surprise was priceless. The minute had gone by and Naruto had demonstrated to everyone that the final Muramasa blade was the best of all. He stabbed his sword into the ground and watched as it faded away into an old rusty blade with the dingy blue Edo. Not many know the sword by its true name, but everyone has heard of the unbreakable sword, Excalibur. My sword, the last Muramasa, can take any form and by sacrificing its power for the day can take its shape of a legendary sword. He threw the broken katana to the ground like a piece of trash and leaned forward, saying, "I see, but this was just for fun. I was intrigued by Kenjutsu, so I wanted to give it a try. My real ability is as the Kitsune general." He began to swell until he was almost as big as the Kyuubi that had attacked 12 years earlier. His dark black fur, which was barely visible through the black clouds, gleamed in the sunlight. The earth beneath him split as his 8 tails rose into the air and cracked against the ground. The stadium lacked sufficient space to accommodate a massive fight. It resembled a scene from an old black dot and white film. "Behold! I am Tamamo. Kitsune no Hachibi." He was obviously larger, but in that larger form, he was incredibly fast. As he lunged towards Naruto, the thrust of his hind legs and the swish of his tail caused the far side of the arena wall to collapse. The blonde was leaning against his sleeping sword, apparently oblivious to the impending disaster. Or so it appeared. Naruto was engulfed in a bright orange flame, and 8 flaming chakra hands burst from his body, beginning to encircle the big black fox. Naruto turned and aimed his savage eyes and long fangs straight at Tamamo. His eyes were filled with rage. He could not help but notice the assault on his village and surrogate family. The chakra arms rolled Tamamo onto his side. Both human and Kitsune spectators watched in silent awe as the stadium reverberated with the trembling rumble and the dust from his fall. The villagers' memories of Naruto, the Kyuubi child, were completely different from what they were seeing. He was out there keeping them safe and subduing the Kyuubi's power, which many thought was uncontrollable. Since Kurama joined their ranks, the Kitsune side had not seen a battle in which the 8 tails had been on the losing side, and that was at the hands of a Hanyu. Naruto sent another set of chakra arms with Rasengans spiraling in hand and easily landed them on the large downed body while the 8-tailed fox was pinned, but the dense fur was not greatly affected by the small spinning chakra. Tamamo only shaved a small portion of the Rasengan's fur before they sputtered away. He soon began to struggle against the chakra hands that were binding him and began to break free. The black fox stood up again after the final bindings were yanked off with a loud growl. You abomination!" He ruffled his black fur and then opened his mouth, launching a ball of sparking lightning in Naruto's direction. Naruto sprang forward, and to the rest of the audience, he vanished in a burst of light, only to reappear behind the fox. Crap, that wasn't planned. Astonished at how much Naruto had resembled his late father in terms of speed, Jiraiya muttered to himself, "Konoha's second flash?" When he reappeared, Naruto turned to Tamamo and skidded to a stop. He made the decision to try that odd Rasengan after recalling the battle with the snakes Kabuto had called forth. He tried to focus while holding both hands out in front of him. He sensed that the power he desired was trying to emerge, but the strain was too great. In the hopes that it would be similar to his previous training, two clones materialized and interacted with his energy buildup using their chakra arms. Just as the fox turned back to face him, a black ball of energy began to form in his hands. Naruto yelled, "Go!" as he launched the ball from his grasp. Hinata yelled, "Naruto! Look out!" from the bleachers. Time seemed to slow down as his blue eyes shifted to the stands and saw tears streaming down her cheeks. Although Naruto could sense that his mind was functioning normally, his movements were essentially non-existent and unresponsive to his commands. For what seemed like a minute, the world gradually went dark, but it was really just his eyes blinking. He was able to observe everything with the slowed time, including the dust particles in the air and the dark ball that was flying out of his hands toward his adversary at an unbelievable speed. However, the most horrifying thing was Hinata's horrified expression. The panic and the tears were nearly unbearable, but why? Her Jujutsu was active, and he could tell by the veins around her eyes that she was staring at him. Well, not really at him, but just behind him. He moved his head just enough to catch a glimpse of a large black fox with a vicious clawed paw creeping towards his body out of the corner of his eye as he struggled against the weight of time slowing down. He blinked slowly again and turned his head back to the front, where he saw the kitsune's shimmering body where the attack was directed. Kitsune trickery, genjutsu. Time resumed its normal course after the realization, and the huge clawed paw made contact with the kitsune Hanyu's flesh. His ragdoll-like body was hurled through the air as the razor-sharp claws punctured his skin. When Hinata witnessed him being struck, she let out a painful scream. His previous battles were not like this attack. There was something uncanny about this injury, even though he had been hurt before. When his body hit the floor, it skidded across the surface until it cracked into the wall, limp and lifeless. His path was paved with reddish streaks of gravel that grew more intense as he got closer to the wall. With a snort of satisfaction, Tamamo turned to face the line of kitsune manning the arena's protective barrier. "I have returned victorious. The title is now mine, and as such I now have one more tail's worth of voting power. Drop the barrier and let me finish what I came to do." "No!" exclaimed the Myobu. Before two hands, one from the 5 tails and one from the 6, landed on her shoulder, she was about to say a lot more. They both gave a disheartening shake of their heads. She began to tremble and saw the barrier fall. Still in shock over what had happened, Tamamo appeared to be grinning as he directed an even more powerful electrical blast from his mouth at the human group. Abruptly, the sobbing Hinata stopped and stood up in front of the large fox. In fascination, the 7-tailed kitsune muttered, "Hinata, that means." The last of the tears escaped her face and landed on her fists, moistening the skin. "For a moment I lost hope, but something rang in my ears, a promise that Naruto made me. He promised to always protect me. Every promise he makes must be fulfilled. This isn't over yet." She stared in wonder as a fierce orange flame engulfed both her fists. In the healing warmth of her mate's chakra, she soon began to smile. It was as if he were holding her hands in real life. The blazing flames continued to grow until two enormous heads that resembled the Kyuubi no Kitsune emerged, each holding a sizable black ball of chakra in its mouth. When Hinata yelled, "Tamamo!" the fox looked at her and realized his error. Instead of giving his mate the remote possibility of pushing chakra, he should have made sure the Hanyu was finished. He realized that the two were actually Kitsune when he realized that it was a technique rather than just chakra. From her augmented hands, the two Bijudama shot out and made direct contact with the fox. Tamamo felt his fur tearing from his skin as he struggled to push back against the force and fend off the attack. There were cries of agony, and the tall black fox collapsed again. Then, above the fallen body, the Bijudama exploded, further harming the fallen fox. In an attempt to contain the enormous explosion, the Kitsune in the audience hastily built a barrier around the arena. Everyone covered their ears with their hands and waited for the mushroom cloud of dust to subside because the rumbling sound was so loud. With a sharp ringing still ringing in their ears, many opened their eyes and stared at one another when the rumbling stopped. High above the ground, Hinata leapt from the arena wall and ran in the direction of Naruto's fall site. To reach the far side of the arena where Naruto had fallen, she leapt over chasms formed by the damaged ground and down a bowl-shaped area beneath the blast's epicenter. When she skidded to a halt, she jumped to her knees and began tossing the broken concrete and stones from the area where he was buried. She had to use all her self-control not to scream in horror at the bloody scene before her as one last big stone was pulled back. Suddenly, she felt a powerful arm snatch her by the waist and begin to drag her away from the wounded body. She screamed, "No! Let me go!" as she clawed at the ground in an attempt to grab something that would help her move forward. "Hinata! Stop!" she cried as her body went limp and she could feel her father's trembling hold. She nodded slowly and kept sobbing in her father's arms as he said, "Let Tsunade do her work." She had not felt his embrace in such a long time, and it felt so cozy and reassuring right then. A sharp pain struck her heart like a bolt of lightning, sending her plummeting to the ground as she gasped aloud. She clutched at her heart, breathing painfully and short gasps. Tsunade took charge of the situation and gave the order, "Medical team, form a circle here." "But shouldn't we? No time, we're losing him," she yelled back, her voice echoing worriedly. Hinata whispered slowly, "Naruto-kun," as the pain pushed her to the ground. You promised." "Tsunade. Sama," exclaimed Heishi. Hinata's not breathing. The typical return to conscientiousness was accompanied by a dull light. A pair of pupilless, pale lavender tinted eyes briefly opened before closing again as the intense light flooded her retinas. To block out the light and allow her other senses to awaken, she squeezed her eyes shut. Outside, she could hear birds singing a cheerful tune and kids playing hide dot and seek in the park, but something more distant from her seemed jumbled and warped. Focusing on the sound, she soon heard a heart monitor to her left beeping softly. She could hear it beeping steadily, each beat in time with a heart that wasn't hers. That rhythmic sound wasn't hers. She looked to the side and tried opening her eyes again when she heard the whooshing of a respiration machine at her left as well. Through blurry vision, she was unable to identify her roommate until the fog began to lift, revealing a peaceful sleeping face nestled into the blankets that covered him up to the chin, topped by unkempt blonde hair. With a groan, she struggled to remove the sleep from her eyes by rubbing her hand to her forehead. As she attempted to relax some of her muscles, she remarked, "Everything is so stiff." She put her hand to her face, feeling oddly weak and with a sore throat. She moaned once more and gradually exerted more effort than normal to get herself upright in bed. She groaned again and slipped her feet to the floor, nearly collapsing when she tried to stand. She steadied herself by catching herself on the bed rail. She staggered forward, muttering weakly, "Something's not right, I need to find someone." For some reason, she had trouble getting to the door because her legs were unsteady. She opened it and began walking down a corridor, supporting herself with the side railing and the wall. The smell of disinfectant tickled her nose as she staggered slowly down the hall and came to a widening sitting area. She looked around the room until she saw a pair of eyes that looked just like hers. A male voice exclaimed, "Hinata! Sama!" and rushed to her side, supporting her petite frame. She recognized his voice, but she couldn't quite identify the face. He had a strange kindness in his eyes and shoulder length hair. His face was the main issue. He didn't resemble any of the typical Hyuga of that age range. Even the tone of his voice began to resemble someone when he said, "Hinata! Sama, you're finally awake." She held a curled finger to her lips and focused on his face. "Neji.ni.san?" she asked in a faltering tone. It didn't match the face she saw, but there was only one possible person. "Yes, Hinata. Sama?" he asked, identifying himself. When she realized why she was weak and the seemingly abrupt passage of time, she muttered, "Neji, how long?" 3 months? She cut in. Realizing that a quarter of a year had passed was a rude awakening, but hold on, did hair grow that quickly? When she realized, her body went limp in his arms. Not months, Hinata. Sama. Years. She had missed 3 birthdays and an additional 1095 days that she could have spent falling in love with her partner, making her actual age 15 years old. Her body then tensed up. Naruto had also been out for that long, and even though she didn't get a good look at him, the respirator's presence suggested that his issue went far beyond lost time. Neji sighed, Naruto.kun. He was terrified of her one-track mind. He supported the majority of her little weight on his gentle waist as he led her down the hall and back into her room, where she discovered Naruto still lying up in bed with hoses and tubes attached to him. "We should probably let Hokage Sama explain the rest. Let me help you back to bed." She began to cry as Tsunade ran out the door, saying, "I knew it wasn't good, but he just looks so, not like him. He's not smiling, he's not Naruto." Her expression showed both joy and anguish at Hinata's present situation. She sat beside the sobbing woman and gestured for Neji to leave. She put an arm around the young woman and began, "You know, I had thought we lost him until you lost consciousness back then. Heishi told me about what you mumbled and I truly think that you both are alive today because of whatever weird curse he has. I mean, he was dead. beyond my help, and when your life was in danger of following him, he just started breathing again." With tears still streaming down her cheeks, Hinata sniffled back a sob as she glanced at her partner. Her pained face had an inquisitive expression as she turned back to face Tsunade. "Is that really living? If he was beyond your help, then is there any hope of him still being him if he ever wakes up, or is there not even a chance that he will wake up?" "I don't know, Hinata. He was so badly injured that I would be surprised if he came out of it at all." She cringed and asked, "How bad?" She was aware that she would soon have to confront it. Hinata nodded, then began to slide off the bed in Naruto's direction. "You sure you can handle it?" she asked. Tsunade remained by her side, keeping an arm around her in case she became too weak to bear it. Hinata's lips began to tremble as the sheets covering Naruto were taken off, and she buried her face in her hands and sobbed uncontrollably. She buried her face in the pillow after Tsunade dragged her back to her bed. "I don't want to make this worse on you, but his head was heavily traumatized in the battle and his EEG scans still show very little activity in his brain." With a muffled sniffle, Hinata questioned, "What does that mean?" "It means that in all likelihood, he will be comatose forever." "No, that can't be." She began sobbing into the pillow once more, and Tsunade could only observe her trembling body. She left the hospital room in silence because she couldn't bear to watch the scene and understood what it was like to lose a lover. She slept on the wet pillow for a few more minutes, and the trembling subsided. When Hinata regained consciousness, she hoped it had all been a terrible nightmare. It was around 1 in the morning, as indicated by a few red dots that flashed across the room. She staggered to the window after pulling her sore body back to her feet. The leaves were joyfully dancing in the night breeze as she gazed out at the still night. With no success, she tried to lift her spirits by saying, "Must be summer again." With her long hair, she felt the warm breeze tickle her face as she opened the large, low, hanging window. From high in the hospital building, she could see how far it was to the ground by looking over the window's edge. "I wonder," was the first thing that came to mind. Naruto might as well be dead if there was no chance of him waking up, and she would have nothing to live for or to cheer herself up without him. "If I jump, what would happen?" she asked, turning to face Naruto solemnly before using her feeble, unsteady legs to climb on top of the windowsill. Looking down at the hard ground with trepidation, she began to seriously consider ending it as the best course of action. Naruto's heart monitor went crazy as soon as she shifted her weight forward, shattering her conviction and sending her tumbling off the windowsill onto the hospital floor's hard tile, bumping her head on the soft bed as she went. When the heart monitor began to sound distressed, a nurse rushed into the room and discovered the Hyuga woman lying on the floor, simultaneously laughing and crying. "Naruto-kun, I knew it. After many years, hey Hinata. Give me a hand?" a manly voice said, snickering slightly at the end. "Really? The same joke?" she questioned, half smiling with delight and half in disgust. "You can't think of anything else other than that?" he insisted. "What? It's a good joke. A year ago, yes, it was funny, but now it's just old." "Not old, a classic." Naruto had awoken from his coma 3 years prior. The morning after Hinata woke up, his eyes opened to the outside world, and he smiled at her, much to her relief. She couldn't help but cry in his arms when she saw his face regain the luster of his normal self. Well, maybe arms isn't the best way to describe it. "Naruto, you're going to be late." Hinata reprimanded him as she attached a Velcro strip to his arm. He got to his feet and raised the rigid object. Hinata snorted and shook her head, saying, "Hey, you think I could get one of these with the thumb held up? It would be much cooler." "No Naruto-kun, you're not getting one like that." This time, the reprimand was accompanied by a very light slap. "So that's a definite no to the one with the middle finger then?" "Most definitely not, Naruto-kun." He was holding Hinata tenderly in his arm following their quiet reunion just after he awoke from his coma and the tubes were removed from his body. For the first time in 3 years, he made his voice heard after grinning down at her. He said, "Who are you?" Hinata missed the unexpected burst of laughter from his lips as her face began to well up with tears. He pleaded, "Don't cry, Hinata." She slapped his face hard, I mean really hard, and looked at him through her tears, saying, "It was a bad joke, I'm sorry." He was taken aback by the response, but he could understand when she cradled his neck and drenched his face with tears. She felt sorry for him, but oddly, he didn't seem to care. "Don't scare me like that. It's bad enough that you lost an arm." He reasoned that he could use chakra to make an arm or even make clones. He was simply happy to be alive with his Hinata at that moment. "You know," he began, his face sporting another cheeky smile. Puzzled by his meaning, she looked up at him and said, "You're going to have to do more work now." "Huh? Well, I'm missing my jack arm. Naruto simply laughed at her innocence, which was one of his favorite things about her, and said, "Wah? I don't get it." "Just a joke, a bad one at that." He laughed again and used his free arm to grip his partner. She nodded and gave him a weary look. "Hey, Hinata, do you want to hear something that isn't a joke?" she asked. "No jokes?" she inquired to be sure. With a smile on his face, he moved closer to her and began speaking softly. He kissed her and she giggled lightly, saying, "I will always love you, my beautiful Hinata." Knowingly, she said, "Promise?" enjoying the eagerly anticipated kiss. With a seductive smile, she said, "Definitely, I promise." "Good." She laughed, felt safe and warm in his arms, and fell asleep fast. Hinata led him down a road with few people and asked, "So are you ready for this?" "You know the answer to that, right, Hinata?" she repeated in her best imitation of his voice. "Sure do. You've been saying it for years, I'll be the next Hokage." Naturally, Naruto laughed at her antics. With a smile, she pulled open a door into a spacious room where a large number of friendly faces met his gaze. "Yeah, but really only you thought I could do it back then." He gave her a quick kiss and smiled before rushing to the front of the room, where all of his friends were assembled, saying, "That was then, and all these people accept you now, go on. This can't proceed without you." Along with the elderly, lecherous sensei Jiraiya, the Sand siblings were gathered, along with the Keisuke Gaara, all of the Konoha ninja from the Chunin exams, and even all of the Jonin sensei. Tsunade held up the ceremonial Hokage hat to the blonde with a gentle expression in her eyes. The Sandame gave him a comforting nod as he glanced around the room one last time to make sure he wasn't dreaming and saw Sarutobi Hiruzen. His smile widened uncontrollably, and he silently thanked God for a life that worked out perfectly. Tsunade gave him the hat and said, "Congratulations on becoming the first Hokage Hanyu. It would appear that there would be a new generation of Kitsune Hanyu, and most likely not the last," he said, nodding at his wife. And so it was. With the aid of people he encountered along the way, including a skillfully crafted sword that has no boundaries and can see everything, the boy who was cursed with the Kyuubi sealed inside of him became Hokage by embracing it. "Who am I?" you inquire. "I told you that at the beginning, didn't I? I have the ability to see everything. My name, huh? Every world I investigate has given me a variety of names. The name they gave me in this story, Shapeshifter, the last Muramasa, is my favorite of all of them. Some call me Kami, others Inari, and at one point I was even the Death God. It's a nice ring, don't you think? Where did I put that plush bear now?"
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.